What if the most advanced ancient tech didn't come from Athens, Rome, or Egypt, but from civilizations history barely mentions? Ruined cities, impossible stonework, and satellite-revealed grids suggest societies centuries ahead of their time. This isn't rumor. It's excavated evidence and peer-reviewed research. Civilizations that shouldn't have had this knowledge, but did. Tonight we explore 33 lost civilizations that force us to rewrite the human timeline. Welcome to 33 Most Advanced Lost Civilizations with Impossible Technology. Let's start with the first. A culture so old and advanced it breaks the timeline on sight. Moonlight cuts across the Anatolian plateau, illuminating massive T-shaped pillars that rise from the earth like ancient sentinels carved by giants. Each megalith weighs up to 16 tons of solid limestone. Each one was quarried, carved with intricate reliefs, transported across miles of rough terrain, and erected with mathematical precision by people who, according to every archaeological textbook written before Klaus Schmidt's revolutionary discoveries in 1994, shouldn't have been capable of building anything more complex than a lean-to shelter or temporary windbreak. The official story painted them as scattered bands of hunter-gatherers wandering the Anatolian hills, following seasonal herds, living hand-to-mouth in a constant struggle for survival. No permanent settlements, no agricultural surplus to support non-food-producing specialists, no complex social organization beyond family groups, and absolutely no capability for monumental architecture requiring coordinated labor, advanced planning, and engineering expertise. But Göbekli Tepe tells a completely different story, one carved in stone 11,600 years ago, that shatters every comfortable assumption about human development. Klaus Schmidt's decades of excavations revealed something that should be impossible. The world's first temple complex, built before agriculture was invented, before pottery was developed, before metalworking was discovered, before civilization was supposed to exist in any recognizable form. The builders demonstrated sophisticated understanding of astronomy that rivals modern observatories. The massive pillars align with stellar constellations visible during specific seasons, creating a three-dimensional star map carved in stone. They grasped advanced engineering principles. The massive stones were quarried using only flint tools, transported across rough terrain without wheeled vehicles or pack animals, then positioned with mathematical precision that required understanding of leverage, balance, and structural load distribution. Most impossibly, they organized labor on a scale that required agricultural surplus, specialized roles, hierarchical command structures, and systematic planning across multiple generations. Everything that wasn't supposed to exist for another 5,000 years when Mesopotamian cities first developed similar organizational capabilities. Picture the scene during construction seasons. Hundreds of exhausted laborers dressed in animal skins working by torchlight through cold Anatolian nights, their breath visible in mountain air that carries the smoke from ritual fires mixed with blood from sacred hunts. Priests or shamans directing the precise placement of multi-ton stones, according to celestial patterns that only they understood through generations of astronomical observation and mathematical calculation. This wasn't random construction driven by religious enthusiasm. This was engineered spirituality, architecture designed to create specific psychological and spiritual experiences through controlled environmental manipulation, acoustic properties, and visual symbolism that overwhelmed the senses and altered consciousness. The complex includes at least 20 circular enclosures discovered so far, each one a carefully planned amphitheater for rituals we can only reconstruct from archaeological evidence. The carved reliefs show lions, bulls, scorpions, serpents, and other predators that would have terrified and awed the builders. These weren't decorative choices or random artistic expressions. They were psychological architecture designed to create specific emotional responses and spiritual experiences. The craftsmanship required specialist stone carvers who understood how to work limestone using only flint tools, copper chisels, and abrasive materials. The relief carvings show anatomical accuracy and artistic sophistication that suggests professional sculptors working within established artistic traditions passed down through generations of training. Recent excavations reveal evidence of massive feasting events that brought together hundreds of people from across the region for construction seasons and ceremonial gatherings. Thousands of animal bones, gazelle, wild boar, aurochs, indicate systematic hunting operations that provided food for large-scale community projects. And then, around 8000 BCE, the builders made an even more inexplicable decision. They deliberately buried the entire complex under thousands of tons of earth and debris, not abandoned due to climate change or social collapse, intentionally erased from the landscape according to some unknown cultural imperative. The site remained hidden until Schmidt's team began uncovering it over 10,000 years later. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest that less than 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. The remaining 95% likely contains additional enclosures, sculptures, and architectural features that could reveal even more sophisticated engineering and artistic capabilities. If this is how human monumental architecture begins, not with simple shelters gradually evolving into more complex structures, but with precisely engineered sacred spaces that required thousands of workers, decades of planning, and organizational capabilities that supposedly didn't exist yet, what else have we fundamentally underestimated about our ancestors' capabilities and achievements? Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of human development and question whether our assumptions about primitive and advanced civilizations have any basis in archaeological reality. Everts, stone circles emerge from Saharan sand like broken teeth, worn smooth by millennia of wind and weather. Half-buried monuments rising from endless dunes that stretch to every horizon under the relentless African sun. The silence here is absolute. No water has flowed for thousands of years. No life exists beyond scattered desert insects, just vast emptiness that seems to swallow sound itself. This is Nabta Playa, where 8,000 years ago, a culture we barely understand built what may be the world's oldest astronomical observatory, using mathematical knowledge that challenges every assumption about prehistoric capabilities. The official narrative dismisses them as primitive pastoral nomads, scratching out subsistence living in harsh desert conditions. According to textbooks, they were cattle herders following seasonal rains across the Sahara, living in temporary camps made of animal hides and wooden poles, leaving nothing behind but scattered pottery shards and animal bones when they moved to new grazing areas. But the megalithic complex at Nabta Playa reveals mathematical and astronomical knowledge that shouldn't exist for another millennium, achieved by people who supposedly lacked writing systems, permanent settlements, or technological sophistication. The stone circles are aligned to summer solstice sunrises with precision that rivals modern observatories using computerized positioning systems. A central stone marks true north with startling accuracy that required understanding of celestial mechanics and systematic observation programs spanning multiple generations. The arrangement tracks the heliacal rising of specific stars, most notably Sirius, whose annual appearance above the horizon signaled the beginning of Nile floods that would transform Egypt into an agricultural paradise centuries later. This wasn't accidental. The astronomical correlations are too precise and too numerous to explain through random stone placement or coincidental alignments. Radiocarbon dating confirms the megaliths were positioned around 6000 BCE, making this observatory complex 1,000 years older than Stonehenge and 4,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. Yet the astronomical precision rivals anything built in later civilizations that we consider far more technologically advanced and mathematically sophisticated. Picture herders dressed in rough woven cloth and animal skins, their faces darkened by relentless desert sun, gathering at predetermined times according to carefully maintained calendars to watch the stars wheel overhead, in patterns their ancestors had tracked for centuries. They observed celestial cycles with the intensity of their survival, depending on accurate predictions, because in the Sahara, it literally did. In a landscape where survival meant predicting seasonal rainfall patterns, underground water availability, and optimal grazing locations, the sky became their calendar, compass, and guide to life and death. The cattle cult, associated with Nabta Playa, suggests these weren't wandering nomads living in constant uncertainty, but highly organized communities with agricultural surplus, specialized knowledge keepers, and sophisticated social hierarchies. Someone had to perform the complex astronomical calculations required for accurate alignments. Someone had to oversee the quarrying, transportation, and precise positioning of massive stone slabs. Someone had to maintain the site across multiple generations of astronomical observations and ritual activities. Archaeological evidence shows they deliberately selected megalithic slabs from quarries located dozens of miles away, then transported them across rough desert terrain, and erected them with the precision of modern surveyors using GPS technology. They accomplished this without iron tools, wheeled vehicles, or pack animals besides cattle. Yet they achieved astronomical alignments accurate to within degrees of arc, tolerances that require mathematical understanding and surveying capabilities. Recent analysis reveals the stone arrangements also function as a three-dimensional calendar system that simultaneously tracks multiple astronomical cycles, solar years, lunar months, stellar movements, and planetary positions. This level of mathematical sophistication required understanding of geometric relationships, proportional systems, and celestial mechanics that most contemporary cultures couldn't achieve. The complex includes additional features discovered through systematic excavation, buried stone slabs arranged in patterns that mirror southern constellation arrangements, underground chambers aligned with specific astronomical events, and measurement systems that suggest standardized units used for both architectural and astronomical calculations. Like Göbekli Tepe, Nabta Playa was eventually abandoned according to planned migration rather than random displacement. Archaeological evidence suggests the astronomical knowledge keepers migrated eastward toward the Nile Valley around 4,800 BCE, carrying their sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, calendar systems, and architectural alignment techniques. This knowledge would eventually manifest in the precisely oriented pyramids, star shaft temples, and astronomical ceiling decorations of pharaonic Egypt. The migration wasn't cultural diffusion or random population movement. It was systematic knowledge transfer that preserved and developed astronomical traditions across geographic boundaries and cultural transitions. From the endless Saharan desert to the fertile Nile River Valley, from cattle herders to pyramid builders, the pattern was already emerging, sophisticated knowledge appearing where it shouldn't, when it shouldn't, preserved and transmitted by people whose capabilities we've systematically underestimated. Monsoon rain pounds the ancient brick streets of Mohenjo-Daro, and water flows smoothly into covered drainage systems that have functioned flawlessly for 4,500 years, without maintenance, repair, or technological upgrades. This is urban engineering that wouldn't be matched in Europe until the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. Except it was designed and built during the Bronze Age by a civilization that left no palaces celebrating kings, no temples glorifying gods, no monuments advertising political power. The official archaeological narrative calls them early city-states with undeciphered script, treating them as interesting curiosities notable mainly for their mysterious writing system that no scholar has managed to crack, despite decades of analysis by expert linguists and cryptographers. The reality revealed by systematic excavation is far more unsettling than academic descriptions suggest. The Indus Valley civilization created the most advanced urban infrastructure system of the ancient world, and they achieved this remarkable feat without any of the social markers that every other complex civilization required. No weapons of war discovered in archaeological layers. No evidence of slavery, forced labor, or social oppression. No royal tombs filled with golden artifacts and sacrificed servants. Just perfectly planned cities that efficiently house nearly 5 million people across a territory larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Every single house in Mohenjo-Daro was connected to a sophisticated municipal drainage system that managed wastewater with engineering precision. Not just elite residences or religious buildings. Every house, from the largest merchant compounds to the smallest artisan workshops. Standardized clay pipes carried wastewater from private bathrooms through covered drains beneath paved streets, creating the world's first comprehensive urban sanitation system. Standardized bricks fired to exact specifications created multi-story residential buildings, commercial warehouses, and public facilities that have survived earthquakes, floods, and millennia of weather exposure. The famous Great Bath, a massive public facility lined with waterproof bitumen and featuring sophisticated drainage, suggests a culture obsessed with cleanliness, ritual purification, and public health management. The city planning defies every assumption about ancient urban development. Streets laid out in perfect geometric grids oriented to catch prevailing monsoon winds for natural air conditioning. Public wells positioned at mathematically precise intervals to ensure equitable water distribution across all residential districts. Granaries built with advanced ventilation systems that prevented grain spoilage during humid seasons. Loading docks at the port city of Lothal, designed with tidal calculations that enabled ships to unload cargo directly into waterproof warehouses. Picture prosperous merchants dressed in flowing cotton. Robes, they invented cotton cultivation and textile production, carefully weighing precious trade goods using standardized stone cubes that were identical from Harappa to Gujarat, across hundreds of settlements spanning over 1,000 miles of territory. This uniformity required centralized quality control and systematic standardization programs that maintained consistency across vast geographic distances. Women wearing intricate jewelry, crafted from exotic materials sourced through extensive trade networks, carnelian beads from Deccan Plateau mines, lapis lazuli from distant Afghan mountains, silver from Iranian highland sources. Children playing with sophisticated terracotta toys in private courtyards, while their parents worked in specialized craft quarters that produced goods for both local consumption and long-distance export. But perhaps most unsettling, no archaeological evidence of centralized political authority, military conquest, or hierarchical social control. No royal palaces, no king's burial chambers filled with tribute, no monuments celebrating divine rulers or military victories. Somehow, they achieved perfect urban planning and technological standardization across a subcontinent-sized territory, without the coercive power structures that every other ancient civilization required for maintaining social order and coordinating large-scale projects. Their writing system remains undeciphered, not because it's primitive or limited, but possibly because it represents a completely different approach to information organization. Seals and tablets that may encode manufacturing standards, commercial regulations, and social contracts rather than royal propaganda, religious texts, or military records. Recent archaeological analysis suggests their urban systems supported population densities that exceeded many modern cities, while maintaining environmental sustainability, economic prosperity, and social stability for over 700 years. No evidence of resource depletion, environmental degradation, or social collapse due to internal conflicts. And then, around 1900 BCE, they made an inexplicable collective decision. They simply abandoned their perfect cities, not destroyed by foreign conquest, not buried by natural disasters, not depopulated by disease epidemics, just systematically evacuated according to some unknown cultural imperative. The sophisticated urban populations melted back into smaller villages and rural settlements, leaving behind the most advanced urban infrastructure that wouldn't be equaled anywhere in the world for thousands of years. The pattern was already unmistakably clear. Impossible technological innovation appearing where it shouldn't exist, when it shouldn't be possible, achieved by people who supposedly couldn't possess such capabilities, according to every model of human social and technological development. Thick Andean coastal fog rolls across ancient platform mounds, while haunting flute melodies echo in the distance. Their otherworldly sounds drifting from ceremonial fires that still burn at the base of towering pyramids that rise from Peru's arid coastal desert like monuments to impossible ambition. This is Corral, the oldest urban center in the Americas, older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge, built by a civilization that achieved monumental architecture without any of the technologies that archaeologists assume are necessary for complex construction projects. The official narrative dismisses them as small ceremonial communities practicing early experimental agriculture along Peru's harsh coastal desert. According to textbooks, Norte Chico represents an interesting but ultimately minor archaeological curiosity. footnotes overshadowed by later, more glamorous civilizations like the Maya, Aztec, and Inca that built with more recognizable technologies and left more comprehensible cultural artifacts. But Norte Chico built America's first cities 5,000 years ago, and they accomplished this achievement in ways that violate every rule of technological development that archaeologists understand. No ceramics. They built massive architectural complexes without pottery, one of the most basic technologies that every other ancient civilization developed early. No decorative art, no painted murals, no carved sculptures, no aesthetic flourishes beyond pure architectural form. No apparent writing system for recording information or coordinating complex projects. No metalworking for creating tools or weapons. Yet they organized labor on a scale that created monuments rivaling anything constructed in Egypt or Mesopotamia. The Great Pyramid at Corral covers 150,000 square meters at its base, significantly larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza, and rises over 60 feet above the surrounding desert floor. Not built with quarried limestone blocks like Egyptian monuments, but with an ingenious system of precisely placed shikra bags, woven containers filled with rocks and sand, stacked in mathematically calculated layers that have resisted major earthquakes for over 5 millennia. This construction technique required sophisticated understanding of seismic engineering, load distribution principles, and materials science that wouldn't be formalized in academic textbooks for thousands of years. The builders understood how to create flexible architecture that could absorb earthquake energy without catastrophic collapse, knowledge that modern seismic engineers are still developing. 25 major ceremonial centers dot the Soup Valley, each positioned according to astronomical calculations and geographic relationships that suggest systematic regional planning. Sunken circular plazas designed for acoustic amplification that enhance musical performances and ceremonial speeches. Platform mounds aligned with solstice and equinox events that connected architectural layouts to cosmic cycles. Residential areas segregated by social function, yet connected by carefully planned walkways that facilitated both daily activities and ceremonial processions. Picture skilled weavers working by flickering firelight, their practiced fingers flying across sophisticated looms that created complex textiles, the only artistic expression Norte Chico produced, if utilitarian cloth can be considered art. Fishermen hauling nets from the Pacific Ocean, while inland farmers tended carefully irrigated fields of cotton and squash using water management techniques adapted to desert conditions. Musicians playing carved bone flutes in circular plazas specifically designed to amplify and modify sound for ritual purposes. The acoustic engineering of these spaces created supernatural auditory effects that enhanced religious ceremonies and community gatherings through controlled reverberation and sound focusing. The most technologically unsettling aspect, their information storage and management system. Quipu-like bundles of knotted cords that encoded complex data about labor allocation, resource distribution, construction schedules, and agricultural planning. A three-dimensional mathematical recording system that stored and transmitted information without alphabetic writing, numerical symbols, or pictographic representations. This system enabled them to coordinate construction projects involving thousands of workers across multiple sites separated by miles of desert terrain. They achieved city-scale architecture and centralized regional planning in what should be a pre-complex society according to every model of social evolution. No evidence of kings ruling from palaces, no armies enforcing tribute collection, no religious hierarchies demanding monuments to powerful gods. Yet they successfully coordinated the labor of thousands across multiple generations, quarried building materials from distant mountain sources, and maintained these massive complexes for over 1,000 years through climate variations and social changes that destroyed most other early civilizations. Archaeological evidence suggests Norte Chico influenced architectural and organizational techniques throughout the Andes for thousands of years. Later, Andean civilizations, Chavin, Moche, Wari, Inca, all used construction methods, urban planning principles, and administrative systems that can be traced back to Norte Chico innovations. Like their predecessors at Göbekli Tepe and Nabta Playa, they eventually abandoned their perfect cities, not due to conquest, catastrophe, or resource depletion, but apparently by collective choice. The massive platforms remained empty as their builders migrated to new regions, carrying architectural knowledge and organizational techniques that would resurface in later Andean civilizations. Across the Pacific Ocean, another island culture was preparing to master oceanic navigation and maritime engineering. Wave-carved Cretan harbors reflect the labyrinthine silhouettes of ancient palaces illuminated by flickering oil lamps, their golden light dancing across magnificent frescoes depicting ships and dolphins that speak of absolute mastery over the Mediterranean's most dangerous and unpredictable waters. This is Minoan civilization, Europe's first technologically advanced culture, builders of palaces so architecturally complex that later classical Greeks could only explain them through mythology, inventing the labyrinth legend because they couldn't believe human architects could design such sophisticated structures. The official archaeological narrative calls them early Mediterranean palace culture, notable mainly for their mysterious linear A script that remains undeciphered and their sudden disappearance around 1450 BCE that left more questions than answers about their technological capabilities and social organization. The reality revealed through systematic excavation is far more impressive and historically significant than conventional descriptions suggest. The Minoans created Europe's first integrated maritime civilization, not merely successful coastal traders or regional sea raiders, but deep ocean navigators with advanced shipbuilding techniques, multi-story architectural engineering, and urban sanitary systems that wouldn't return to European cities for over 1,000 years after their civilization collapsed. The palace complex at Knossos covers 6 acres of carefully planned architectural space, rises 5 stories above ground level, and contains over 1,400 rooms connected by corridors so intricate and functionally complex that later Greeks invented the Minotaur labyrinth myth to explain architectural sophistication they couldn't understand or replicate. But this wasn't architectural confusion or random construction. It was systematic engineering designed to solve specific technical problems. Ingenious light wells brought natural illumination to interior rooms located far from exterior walls. Elaborate drainage systems carried wastewater through clay pipe networks wider and more sophisticated than Roman sewers built over a millennium later. Flush-style latrines used hydraulic seals that prevented sewer gases from contaminating living spaces, sanitary engineering that most European cities didn't achieve until the modern era. The famous throne room features Europe's oldest known royal seat, carved from a single massive block of gypsum and positioned to catch optimal natural light throughout the day, while providing acoustically perfect conditions for court ceremonies and administrative functions. Magnificent frescoes show elaborate court rituals, with participants wearing intricately decorated clothing that required specialized textile industries, sophisticated dye extraction techniques, and trade networks spanning the entire Mediterranean basin. Picture Minoan sailors dressed in linen kilts navigating by star positions, and seasonal wind patterns, their technologically advanced ships loaded with precious cargo representing international commerce. Translucent cycladic marble, Egyptian gold jewelry, Mesopotamian tin ingots for bronze production, maritime expeditions that required understanding of deep ocean navigation, seasonal weather prediction, and long-distance logistical planning, skilled artisans painting magnificent frescoes by lamplight, while aristocratic families bathed in carved stone tubs filled with heated water, channeled through sophisticated bronze pipe systems that provided hot and cold running water throughout palace complexes. Women wearing golden jewelry that required microscopic granulation techniques and metalworking skills that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe until Renaissance goldsmith guilds developed comparable craftsmanship. Their harbor engineering at sites like Kamos demonstrates intimate understanding of Mediterranean tidal patterns, seasonal storm protection, and ship maintenance requirements that enabled permanent maritime infrastructure. Warehouses built with precise drainage systems that protected stored goods from moisture damage. Loading docks positioned for optimal cargo handling that minimized labor requirements and maximized efficiency. Shipyards, where archaeological evidence suggests they constructed vessels larger and more seaworthy than anything built in the Mediterranean for the next millennium. The palace complex at Phaistos contains Europe's first comprehensive sewage processing system. Not merely drainage pipes, but actual waste treatment facilities with settling chambers, overflow channels, and filtration systems that processed urban wastewater. Private residential apartments featured running water, indoor bathrooms, and ventilation systems that maintained comfortable temperatures throughout Mediterranean seasonal variations. Perhaps most remarkably for a Bronze Age civilization, their society shows no archaeological evidence of military fortification, aggressive warfare, or conquest-based expansion. No defensive walls surrounding cities, no weapons glorified in artistic representations, no monuments celebrating military victories over defeated enemies. They achieved Mediterranean commercial dominance through technological superiority, maritime expertise, and extensive trade networks rather than military conquest or political coercion. Their influence shaped Mediterranean development for centuries after their political collapse. Mycenaean Greek palaces incorporated Minoan architectural innovations, plumbing systems, and artistic techniques. Later, classical Greek architecture borrowed Minoan proportional systems, decorative conventions, and construction methods that had been perfected in Cretan palaces. Around 1450 BCE, Minoan civilization collapsed, possibly due to the catastrophic volcanic eruption at Santorini, possibly from Mycenaean military conquest, or possibly from a combination of natural disasters and political upheaval. But their technological achievements didn't disappear entirely. Their engineering knowledge, artistic traditions, and maritime expertise became foundational elements of later Mediterranean civilizations. 5 civilizations, 5 impossible technological achievements, 5 clear examples of sophisticated capabilities, appearing where and when they shouldn't exist according to conventional models of human development. Nigerian plateau at midnight, where terracotta heads stare blindly from red earth that glows like molten copper in the light of ancient furnaces that burn with temperatures hot enough to melt stone. This is Nok territory, a landscape where iron smelting appeared in sub-Saharan Africa, suddenly fully formed, without any apparent learning curve, technological development, or gradual progression from simpler metalworking techniques. The official story paints them as simple early farmers, who gradually developed basic metalworking skills around 1000 BCE through trial and error experimentation with local iron ore deposits. According to textbooks, the Nok culture represents a typical example of slow technological evolution, where primitive agricultural communities slowly learned to work with metals over centuries of gradual improvement. The archaeological evidence tells a radically different story, one that violates every established rule of technological progression and human development. Iron production at Taruga and dozens of other Nok sites demonstrates sophisticated understanding of furnace design, precise temperature control, and complex alloy composition from the very first archaeological examples. No crude early attempts discovered in lower stratigraphic layers, no failed experimental smelts showing gradual learning processes, no evidence of technological development over time. Picture-master ironworkers silhouetted against furnace glow that turns night into day, their muscular bodies gleaming with sweat as they maintain precise temperatures above 1,200 degrees Celsius, using techniques that require generations to perfect. The rhythmic hammering of red-hot metal on stone anvils echoes across the plateau, while skilled apprentices operate sophisticated bellows systems made from carefully prepared animal hide and precision-molded clay components. These weren't primitive smiths fumbling through trial and error learning processes. These were master metallurgists executing complex techniques that required deep understanding of chemistry, physics, and materials science. Techniques that appeared without archaeological precedent, as if downloaded directly into Nok culture from some external source of technological knowledge. The Nok furnaces employed sophisticated tuyere systems, precisely engineered ceramic pipes that directed airflow with mathematical accuracy to create optimal combustion conditions. Modern slag analysis reveals they understood carbon content management with scientific precision, deliberately producing everything from soft wrought iron, perfect for agricultural tools, to hard steel, ideal for weapons and cutting implements. The iron artifacts show unmistakable evidence of advanced metallurgical techniques, controlled quenching for optimal hardness, systematic tempering for flexibility and durability, and work hardening processes that improve tool performance. These sophisticated metalworking methods wouldn't be formalized in European technical manuals for centuries after Knock smiths had already mastered them. Their famous terracotta sculptures demonstrate parallel technological mastery that challenges assumptions about early African capabilities. The life-size heads required controlled firing techniques that maintain precise temperatures throughout days-long kiln cycles, sophisticated clay preparation using standardized recipes, and artistic traditions that produced remarkably consistent results across dozens of sites spanning multiple centuries. The sculptures reveal sophisticated understanding of human anatomy, mathematical proportional systems, and advanced kiln technology that prevented cracking during the complex firing process. The consistency of artistic style and technical execution suggests professional craft guilds with standardized training programs and quality control systems. But here's the most unsettling archaeological mystery. There's no identifiable technological ancestor for Knock metallurgy. No evidence of a copperworking phase that typically precedes iron production. No Bronze Age developmental period showing gradual metallurgical advancement. No archaeological sequence demonstrating progression from simple to complex metalworking techniques. Iron metallurgy appears in Knock culture like a complete technological package, fully functional, immediately productive, and systematically implemented across multiple sites simultaneously. This violates every model of technological development that archaeologists use to understand human cultural evolution. Archaeological evidence suggests Knock communities operated industrial-scale iron production that supplied metal tools across West Africa through extensive trade networks. They established commercial relationships that carried standardized Knock metalwork from Nigeria to Ghana, from Senegal to Chad, from the Atlantic coast to the Lake Chad basin. Not just local production for immediate community needs, but systematic manufacturing for continental distribution. Recent excavations reveal evidence of specialized ironworking settlements with multiple furnaces, standardized workshop layouts, and organized residential areas for metallurgical specialists. These weren't occasional craft activities. They were permanent industrial operations that required significant labor investment and technical expertise. Isotopic analysis of Knock iron artifacts found across West Africa confirms their Nigerian origin and demonstrates the extent of their trade networks. Standardized tool types, consistent alloy compositions, and uniform manufacturing techniques suggest centralized quality control and systematic production methods. The Knock technological legacy influenced African metallurgy for over a millennium. Later, West African kingdoms, Ghana, Mali, Songhai, all used ironworking techniques that can be traced directly back to Knock innovations. Their metallurgical knowledge became the technological foundation for African urban civilizations, military expansion, and agricultural development. When Knock culture finally declined around 200 CE, their ironworking techniques had already spread across sub-Saharan Africa, carried by skilled smiths who preserved and transmitted technical knowledge through professional apprenticeship systems that maintain metallurgical standards across cultural boundaries. Thousands of miles north, another culture was pushing stone engineering to its absolute physical limits. Ethiopian highlands shrouded in perpetual mist, where towering granite stelae pierced the fog like frozen lightning bolts hurled by gods and left, standing as monuments to impossible ambition. Each monolithic obelisk carved from a single massive block of solid granite. The largest standing specimen weighs 160 tons, one unbroken piece of stone that was quarried from bedrock, precisely carved with architectural details, transported across rough mountain terrain, and erected with engineering precision that challenges modern heavy construction capabilities. Official history dismisses Axum as merely a regional Christian kingdom that controlled Red Sea trade routes between 100 and 940 CE, treating it as a minor African state that achieved limited success through favorable geographic location and commercial opportunism rather than technological innovation or engineering sophistication. Archaeological investigation reveals something far more staggering than conventional historical narratives suggest. Aksumite engineers achieved stone carving and monument construction that pushed the absolute boundaries of what's physically possible using ancient technology and manual labor. The largest fallen stela, the legendary obelisk of Aksum, originally stood 33 meters tall and weighed over 500 tons when complete. This wasn't assembled from multiple stone blocks like Egyptian obelisks or Mesopotamian ziggurats. It was carved from one monstrous piece of solid granite that required quarrying, shaping, and transportation techniques that leave modern engineers questioning how such achievements were possible without mechanized equipment. The precision of Aksumite stonework is archaeologically unsettling. Each towering stela features intricately carved windows, doorways, and multi-story architectural details that perfectly mimic wooden building construction, except every element is hewn from solid granite using only bronze and iron hand tools. The largest monuments demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, mathematical load distribution, and foundation requirements that demanded calculations most medieval civilizations couldn't perform. Picture teams of specialist stonecutters working by flickering torchlight, their bronze and iron tools sending cascades of sparks against granite surfaces as they followed precise chalk marks measured using hemp cord measuring systems and calibrated wooden rulers. Hundreds of skilled workers coordinating to haul massive stone monuments along wooden roller systems, while master engineers calculated leverage points, center of gravity requirements, and structural balance tolerances. This wasn't trial and error construction where mistakes could be corrected. One miscalculation during quarrying, carving, or transportation would mean starting completely over with a new 500-ton granite block. The precision required suggests advanced planning, mathematical modeling, and engineering expertise that operated according to systematic technical knowledge rather than random experimentation. Archaeological investigation of Aksumite quarry sites reveals evidence of controlled stone-splitting techniques using carefully placed wooden wedges, precision bronze picks, and possibly heated oil applications to fracture granite along predetermined lines. The quarrying process required understanding of stone physics, fracture mechanics, and tool metallurgy that enabled systematic extraction of massive monolithic blocks. But the greatest mystery remains transportation logistics. Moving 160-ton granite monoliths across rough Ethiopian highland terrain required engineering solutions that leave no archaeological trace. Sophisticated wooden machinery, complex rope and pulley systems, or transportation technologies that were completely dismantled and removed after use. The underground tomb complexes demonstrate equally impressive engineering capabilities. Multi-room burial chambers carved directly into solid bedrock using manual excavation techniques, with precisely fitted stone slabs that sealed chambers so effectively they remained undisturbed for over 1,000 years. The tomb of King Bazan features interconnected rooms connected by narrow passages that required understanding of architectural load distribution and sophisticated water drainage systems. Aksumite measuring and proportional systems show remarkable standardization across the entire monumental complex, clear evidence of centralized planning, quality control oversight, and dimensional accuracy maintained across decades of continuous construction activity. They developed modular design principles that created visual harmony while maintaining structural integrity throughout the monument field. The stele field represents systematic monument construction rather than random commemorative building. Each obelisk positioned according to geometric relationships with existing monuments, creating an integrated architectural landscape that functioned as both cemetery and ceremonial space. The planning required mathematical understanding of spatial relationships and long-term construction coordination. Aksumite engineering influenced Ethiopian building traditions for over a millennium after their political collapse. Medieval Ethiopian church architecture, particularly the famous rock-cut churches of Lalibela, employed construction techniques, proportional systems, and stoneworking methods that derived directly from Aksumite innovations developed centuries earlier. Recent archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar and laser measurement technology reveal additional unexcavated stelae buried beneath centuries of sediment accumulation. The The complete Aksumite monument field was likely much larger and more architecturally complex than currently visible remains suggest. Like other advanced ancient civilizations, the Aksumites eventually abandoned their monumental achievements when their political power declined, but the towering granite stelae remain standing as permanent testimony to engineering capabilities that shouldn't exist in what historians dismiss as a regional kingdom, yet indisputably demonstrate technological mastery that rivals modern stoneworking achievements. In the mountains beyond Ethiopia, another ancient culture was preparing to transform sound itself into consciousness-altering technology. Torchlight flickers mysteriously in underground stone galleries, where hidden water channels create otherworldly acoustics, and conch shell trumpets blast with supernatural resonance that seems to emanate from the living rock itself. This is Chavin de Huantar, Peru's oldest major ceremonial center, where master architects 2,800 years ago designed revolutionary buildings that manipulate human consciousness through precisely engineered sound, creating the world's first psychological architecture. The official archaeological narrative dismisses Chavin as a strange religious cult that influenced later Andean civilizations through artistic styles and ceremonial practices, treating it as just another prehistoric religious center where primitive people gathered for basic ritual activities and artistic expression. Archaeological investigation reveals something far more sophisticated and technologically disturbing than conventional academic descriptions suggest. Chavin's builders created humanity's first systematically designed psychological architecture, structures engineered not merely to provide shelter or display religious art, but to deliberately alter human perception, systematically disorient the senses, and induce controlled altered states of consciousness through precisely calculated acoustic phenomena. Comprehensive Stanford University acoustic studies, conducted with modern sound measurement equipment, revealed that Chavin's underground gallery systems function as sophisticated resonance chambers that amplify specific sound frequencies while dampening others according to mathematical ratios. Conch shell trumpets blown in the circular ceremonial plaza create complex sound waves that travel through carefully carved stone channels, emerging in interior chambers as otherworldly howls, whispers, and harmonic overtones. The acoustic effects are genuinely hallucinogenic. Visitors consistently report spatial disorientation, auditory hallucinations, vertigo, and altered perception within minutes of entering the acoustically engineered underground chambers. These aren't accidental architectural side effects. They're deliberately designed psychological experiences created through systematic acoustic engineering. Picture terrified initiates stumbling through pitch-black corridors while hidden priests manipulate their psychological state through controlled sound environments. Water channeled through concealed passages creates white noise that masks approaching footsteps and disguises the location of unseen ritual specialists. Acoustic chambers positioned at calculated angles make human voices seem to emanate directly from carved stone walls, creating supernatural communication experiences. Strategically positioned air channels carry deliberately introduced scents, temperature variations, and atmospheric pressure changes that suggest supernatural presence to disoriented participants. The underground complex functions as a comprehensive sensory manipulation system that controlled every aspect of visitors' psychological experience. The gallery networks aren't random underground tunnels. They're systematically engineered sound chambers with wall surfaces positioned at precise mathematical angles to create specific reverberation patterns, echo effects, and harmonic resonances. Some acoustic channels amplify whispered conversations into thunderous echoes that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere. Other chambers dampen screams into barely audible murmurs, creating acoustic isolation that enhances psychological disorientation. Chavin's architects demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychoacoustics, the scientific study of how sound affects human psychology, physiology, and neurological function. They understood how specific sound frequencies could induce trance states, trigger emotional responses, and create spiritual experiences through controlled environmental manipulation. Water engineering adds additional layers of sophisticated sensory manipulation. Underground channels carry mountain streams through the architectural complex, emerging as fountains in some locations, disappearing into hidden drainage systems in others, creating constantly shifting acoustic environments where visitors never know which sounds represent water, wind, or deliberately produced effects. The famous Lanzon monolith, a 4.5-meter carved granite sculpture positioned at the complex's geometric center, serves as the ultimate acoustic focal point. Its specially designed chamber creates perfect acoustic resonance for human vocal ranges, transforming normal speech into supernatural rumbling that appears to emanate directly from the carved deity itself, creating convincing supernatural communication experiences. But Chavin's acoustic engineering wasn't accidental or intuitive. It was systematically planned and mathematically calculated. Tool marks on stone surfaces showed deliberate shaping designed to create specific sound reflection patterns. Gallery positioning calculated to maximize psychological disorientation effects. Chamber dimensions designed according to mathematical ratios that produce optimal acoustic manipulation results. This represents architecture functioning as advanced technology, buildings designed to systematically hack human consciousness through sophisticated environmental manipulation techniques. Not religious architecture in any conventional sense, but neurological engineering that use stone, water, and controlled acoustics to induce predictable spiritual and psychological experiences. Archaeological evidence suggests Chavin's acoustic manipulation techniques influenced ceremonial architecture throughout the Andes for over a millennium. Later, Andean cultures, Moche, Nazca, Wari, and even Inca, incorporated similar acoustic chambers, sound manipulation systems, and consciousness-altering architectural features into their own sacred buildings and ceremonial complexes. The systematic knowledge of consciousness-altering acoustic architecture spread throughout pre-Columbian America, influencing religious and ceremonial building design across multiple cultures and geographic regions. Chavin's innovations became foundational technologies for Andean spiritual and religious architecture. While Chavin architects engineered sound to systematically manipulate human consciousness, another ancient people across the Pacific Ocean were mastering stone transportation and long-distance logistics on an unprecedented scale through technologies that remain archaeologically mysterious. Humid Gulf Coast lowlands perpetually shrouded in morning mist, where colossal basalt heads emerge from swampy earth like the buried faces of stone giants, their imposing features staring across millennia, with expressions that seem to harbor ancient secrets about impossible achievements. These are Olmec monuments, the oldest complex megalithic sculptures in the Americas, carved from individual stones weighing up to 40 tons and transported across distances that should have been impossible using technologies available to Bronze Age civilizations. Official archaeological narratives classify them as a formative Mesoamerican culture that influenced later civilizations through artistic styles and religious concepts, treating the Olmecs as an interesting but ultimately primitive culture that created some impressive art but lacked sophisticated technological capabilities or complex social organization. Archaeological investigation reveals something far more technologically impressive than conventional academic descriptions suggest. The Olmecs created America's first systematic long-distance industrial transportation network, successfully moving multi-ton basalt sculptures across 60 to 90 miles of challenging jungle terrain, river systems, and swampland using engineering technologies that leave no identifiable trace in the archaeological record. The famous colossal heads discovered at La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes were carved from specific basalt, quarried exclusively at Cerro Sintepec in the distant Tuxtla Mountains, an extremely challenging transportation journey that required crossing multiple rivers, navigating through dense tropical jungle, and traversing rough mountainous terrain that challenges modern heavy construction equipment. Each colossal head represents thousands of person-hours of coordinated labor, systematic quarrying operations, precision stone carving, and complex logistics coordination. Not isolated artistic achievements created by individual sculptors, but evidence of systematic megalithic engineering capabilities repeated across multiple sites over several centuries of continuous monument construction. Picture massive transportation teams coordinating to haul 20-ton basalt sculptures along carefully planned routes using sophisticated wooden roller systems, while specialized engineers calculated river crossing points, weight distribution requirements, and terrain obstacle solutions. Master sculptors working with hard stone hammers and controlled abrasive techniques, gradually refining facial features that required anatomical knowledge, artistic traditions, and mathematical understanding of proportion, balance, and structural integrity. These weren't primitive stone knappers experimenting with basic carving techniques. These were professional sculptors executing sophisticated artistic visions that required systematic training, standardized tools, and mathematical understanding of three-dimensional design principles. The consistency of artistic style and technical execution across multiple sites suggests organized craft guilds with standardized training programs, but the transportation logistics remain archaeologically unsolved despite decades of investigation. Successfully moving objects weighing 20-40 tons across pre-Columbian terrain required sophisticated engineering solutions that disappeared completely without leaving archaeological evidence. Advanced wooden machinery systems, complex rope and pulley technologies, or transportation techniques that were completely unknown to later Mesoamerican civilizations. The Olmec long-distance trade networks demonstrate equally mysterious logistical capabilities. Jade artifacts discovered at Olmec archaeological sites source geologically to specific deposits in Guatemala, over 500 miles away across challenging terrain. Obsidian cutting tools trace chemically to Mexican highland volcanic sources. Serpentine, magnetite, and cinnabar decorative materials originated from scattered locations throughout Mesoamerica. This wasn't occasional opportunistic long-distance trading or random cultural exchange. This was systematic resource acquisition that required permanent commercial relationships, reliable transportation infrastructure, and coordinated logistics networks spanning thousands of miles of diverse terrain and multiple cultural boundaries. Olmec settlement archaeology reveals clear evidence of social stratification and systematic craft production. Elite residential compounds built on artificial earthen platforms that elevated important families above flood levels. Specialized workshop areas segregated by material type and manufacturing function. Sophisticated storage facilities designed for imported raw materials and finished products. Administrative centers that coordinated multi-site construction projects and regional trade operations. Their mathematical and astronomical innovations influenced every subsequent Mesoamerican civilization for over 2 millennia. Maya, Zapotec, and Aztec calendar systems all derive from original Olmec mathematical calculations and astronomical observations. The famous Olmec baby face sculptures demonstrate sophisticated understanding of human physical development, anatomical accuracy, and psychological expression that required systematic observation and established artistic traditions. La Venta's Great Pyramid, constructed from carefully selected earth and clay rather than quarried stone blocks, demonstrates sophisticated architectural engineering that created stable monumental structures without using the massive stone construction techniques employed by other ancient cultures. The pyramid features precisely calculated slope angles, internal drainage systems, and foundation preparations that have successfully resisted jungle environmental conditions for 2,500 years. Archaeological evidence suggests Olmec engineering and organizational techniques influenced later Mesoamerican civilizations long after their political collapse. Maya megalithic construction, Zapotec urban planning, and Aztec tribute networks all employed methods that can be traced directly back to original Olmec innovations developed over a millennium earlier. Like their contemporary civilizations around the world, the Olmecs eventually evolved beyond their original cultural form, not destroyed by external conquest, but transformed into successor cultures that preserved their essential technological knowledge while developing new social and political organizations. Their megalithic transportation techniques disappeared, their jade trade networks collapsed, but their mathematical, artistic, and organizational achievements became permanent foundations for all subsequent American civilizations. Across the vast Pacific Ocean, another ancient culture was preparing to perform genuine miracles with water engineering in Earth's most challenging desert environments. Petra after a rare desert rainstorm, red sandstone cliffs streaked with precious water that vanishes almost instantly into ingeniously hidden channels carved by engineering hands that understood hydraulic science better than most modern urban planners. This is Nabatean territory, where Arab merchant engineers transformed one of Earth's most hostile and water-scarce environments into a sophisticated hydraulic garden capable of sustaining 30,000 people in the heart of one of the world's most challenging deserts. Official historical narratives reduce them to simple caravan traders who controlled profitable trade routes between Arabia and the Mediterranean from 300 BCE to 100 CE. Treating them as opportunistic merchants who achieved regional success through favorable geographic positioning rather than technological innovation or engineering sophistication. Archaeological investigation reveals hydraulic engineers who achieved comprehensive water management in extreme arid environments using technologies that wouldn't be equaled until modern times. The Nabateans carved over 700 individual cisterns, distribution channels, and settling tank systems directly into Petra's cliff faces, creating a three-dimensional water storage and distribution network that captured, filtered, and systematically distributed every precious drop of seasonal rainfall across their desert metropolis. The treasury facade, Petra's most photographed and famous monument, isn't merely architectural display designed to impress visitors. It's strategically positioned at the calculated intersection of multiple water management channels that create a comprehensive hydraulic hub for the entire urban complex. Sophisticated drainage channels carved directly into cliff faces above the treasury carry flash floodwaters into precisely engineered settling tank systems, where sediment naturally separates from clean water through gravity separation. Overflow channels prevent catastrophic flooding while maximizing water retention efficiency. Picture skilled Nabatean hydraulic engineers conducting systematic water flow tests using colored dyes to verify gradient calculations, determining precise requirements for channels that had to maintain steady flow rates across miles of rough desert terrain without mechanical pumping systems. Specialized stone carvers working by oil lamplight to create settling chamber systems with precisely angled floor surfaces that naturally separate clean drinking water from muddy debris through controlled gravity separation. These weren't decorative fountain displays or random water collection attempts. They were comprehensive life support systems, engineered for survival in a landscape where understanding fluid dynamics, evaporation control, and water purification meant the difference between prosperous urban civilization and death by dehydration. The dam construction systems represent masterpieces of desert engineering that required sophisticated understanding of flash flood hydrology. Stone barrier walls built across seasonal wadis to capture sudden deluges, carrying millions of gallons of water mixed with rocks and debris. Spillway systems designed to handle 100-year flood events without destroying infrastructure. Systematic siltation management that prevented channel blockages while maintaining optimal water flow rates across multiple seasonal cycles. The most technologically sophisticated element of Nabatean water management, their multi-stage filtration systems, complex multi-chamber tank networks that employed controlled gravity separation, systematic sand filtration, and calculated settling periods to produce safe drinking water from muddy flash flood runoff. The chambers were sized according to mathematical ratios that optimized cleaning efficiency while minimizing precious water loss through evaporation in extreme desert conditions. Nabatean settlements throughout Jordan and Saudi Arabia demonstrate standardized hydraulic engineering principles, identical channel design specifications, proportional cistern sizing systems, and water management techniques that suggest centralized engineering knowledge, systematic technical training, and quality control standards maintained across hundreds of individual sites spanning vast geographic distances. The famous SEQ, Petra's narrow entrance gorge that creates such a dramatic approach to the treasury, functions as a massive integrated water management system, cleverly disguised as a defensive passage and tourist attraction. Sophisticated channel networks carved into both cliff faces collect seasonal rainwater from the plateau above, direct it through settling tank systems then systematically distributed to residential and commercial areas throughout the city. Every modern tourist walking through the Siki is unknowingly walking through an ancient hydraulic machine. Nabatean hydraulic success enabled extensive trade networks that physically connected India with Rome, China with Egypt, and Africa with Europe through reliable desert crossing routes. Merchant caravans could successfully cross the Arabian Desert because Nabatean engineers guaranteed reliable water availability at precisely calculated intervals along routes spanning thousands of miles of otherwise uninhabitable territory. Comprehensive water security became the technological foundation for commercial security and international trade dominance. Roman conquest in 106 CE didn't destroy Nabatean cities or eliminate their technological achievements. It systematically absorbed and studied them. Roman engineers carefully documented Nabatean hydraulic techniques and incorporated their water management innovations into Roman infrastructure projects throughout the empire. Arabic technical manuscripts preserve detailed Nabatean water management formulas, construction specifications, and maintenance procedures that were still being consulted by medieval hydraulic engineers over 1,000 years later. Archaeological evidence shows Nabatean hydraulic technologies influenced desert water management throughout the Islamic world. Medieval Arabic engineering treatises, Ottoman irrigation projects, and even modern Middle Eastern water systems all employ techniques that derive directly from original Nabatean innovations developed 2,000 years ago. Meanwhile, thousands of miles northeast in the mountains of central Anatolia, another ancient civilization was systematically transforming fire into organized industrial technology. Furnaces glow like fallen stars against the darkness of Hattusa, sending cascades of sparks flying through cold Anatolian mountain air as bronze hammers ring rhythmically against iron that still glows cherry red from the forge fires. This is Hittite metallurgy, the first true industrial-scale iron production in human history, achieved 3,300 years ago when iron remained a precious metal rarer and more valuable than gold throughout most of the civilized world. The official historical narrative reduces them to a late Bronze Age kingdom that merely contributed to the eventual transition from bronze to iron technology through gradual technological development and cultural diffusion. According to textbooks, the Hittites represent one step in a slow evolutionary process, where ancient civilizations gradually learned to work with increasingly complex metals. Archaeological evidence reveals something far more revolutionary and technologically significant than conventional academic descriptions suggest. The Hittites didn't simply discover iron working through accidental experimentation, they systematically industrialized it, creating the first organized mass production of controlled iron alloys when most contemporary civilizations were still struggling with basic copper smelting and primitive tin-bronze compositions. Here's an impossible statistic that challenges every assumption about Bronze Age technological capabilities. While iron artifacts remain rare curiosities in Bronze Age Egyptian and Mesopotamian archaeological sites, Hittite excavation layers contain thousands of iron implements, agricultural tools, military weapons, decorative objects, and utilitarian household items produced in quantities that clearly indicate routine industrial manufacturing rather than precious experimental metalworking or occasional luxury production. Hittite iron artifacts demonstrate sophisticated understanding of carbon content manipulation that required systematic knowledge of metallurgical chemistry. Analysis reveals artifacts ranging from soft wrought iron, perfect for agricultural tools, to hard steel, ideal for military weapons and ceremonial items. Metallurgical testing shows controlled carbon content ranging precisely from 0.1% to 1.7%, a level of chemical precision that requires understanding of materials science that wouldn't be formally documented for another 2 millennia. Picture master smiths working in organized workshops, teaching carefully selected apprentices the closely guarded secrets of carbon control, exactly how much charcoal to add during different stages of smelting, precisely how long to maintain specific heating temperatures, how to read subtle metal color variations by firelight to achieve desired hardness levels for different applications. These weren't accidental discoveries made through random experimentation. They were systematic metallurgical techniques passed down through generations of specialist craftsmen who understood complex relationships between carbon content, heating duration, cooling rates, and final material properties. Cuneiform tablets discovered in Hattusa. Archives record iron as an extremely valuable diplomatic gift, more precious than gold jewelry or silver vessels. Royal correspondence letters to Egyptian pharaohs specifically promise iron daggers and tools as tokens of political alliance and friendship. Palace inventory lists systematically catalog iron objects stored in royal treasuries alongside other precious materials. This wasn't experimental technology or random metalworking. It was controlled production of strategic materials with recognized commercial and military value. Hittite metallurgical specialists developed sophisticated furnace designs that consistently achieved temperatures above 1,200 degrees Celsius, using forced air systems powered by coordinated teams operating leather bellows. Archaeological excavations reveal standardized forge layouts, consistent tuyere pipe designs, and slag composition analysis that indicates systematic quality control maintained across multiple production sites throughout the empire. The furnaces themselves represent advanced engineering that required understanding of combustion science, airflow dynamics, and thermal management. Stone-lined fire chambers designed to contain extreme heat, carefully calculated air injection systems that maintained optimal burning conditions, and specialized ceramic components that could withstand repeated heating and cooling cycles without structural failure. Hittite ironworking knowledge became a closely guarded state secret with profound political implications. Royal laws specifically prescribed death penalties for revealing metallurgical techniques to foreign agents or trading partners. Iron production centers were strategically located in secured areas of major cities, protected by military guards and administrative oversight that prevented unauthorized access to production facilities. The Hittite Empire maintained its technological advantage for over 4 centuries through systematic knowledge protection and controlled technology transfer. Only authorized craftsmen could access iron production facilities, and all finished products were subject to royal inventory control that tracked distribution for military, ceremonial, and diplomatic purposes. When the Hittite Empire finally collapsed around 1180 BCE due to political upheaval and foreign invasion, their iron technology scattered across the Mediterranean and Near East through refugee populations and displaced craftsmen. Hittite metallurgical specialists carried their advanced knowledge to new kingdoms throughout the region, spreading industrial iron production techniques across multiple cultures and geographic areas. The Iron Age didn't begin through gradual technological evolution or independent invention. It began with the systematic diaspora of Hittite metallurgical expertise preserved and transmitted by skilled craftsmen who established new production centers throughout the ancient world. Archaeological evidence shows Hittite ironworking techniques influenced metallurgical development throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia for over a millennium. Later, civilizations adopted Hittite furnace designs, carbon control methods, and alloy composition techniques that became foundational technologies for medieval and early modern metallurgy. Along Anatolia's Mediterranean coastline, another ancient culture was transforming death itself into monumental stone architecture. Mediterranean sunset illuminates towering limestone cliffs, where elaborate tomb facades are carved directly into vertical rock faces that plunge hundreds of feet toward the azure sea below. These are Lycian monuments, architectural impossibilities hewn from solid stone by master engineers who treated massive cliff faces like raw construction material for creating underground cities of the dead. Official archaeological history dismisses them as merely a regional burial tradition practiced by local Anatolian communities during the relatively brief period from 400 to 300 BCE, treating these remarkable achievements as interesting but ultimately minor examples of ancient funeral architecture. Engineering analysis reveals something far more technically sophisticated than conventional academic descriptions suggest. Advanced rock excavation and structural load management that created complex multi-room tomb complexes inside cliff faces that should have been impossible to carve using ancient tools and manual labor techniques. The carved tomb facades precisely mimic elaborate wooden architecture, intricately detailed doors, decorative windows, classical columns, and ornamental elements that replicate timber construction methods down to individual wood grain patterns and structural joints. But this isn't simply stone carved and painted to superficially resemble wood surfaces. This represents living bedrock systematically carved away to create negative space architecture, with entire rooms and connecting corridors excavated from solid cliff faces. Picture specialized teams of stonecutters suspended on complex rope systems, hammering bronze and iron tools against limestone surfaces for months at a time to excavate a single tomb chamber. Master carvers performing precise mathematical calculations to determine load distribution requirements that would prevent catastrophic cliff collapse, while apprentice workers hauled tons of stone debris up 100-foot rock faces using rope and pulley systems. These weren't shallow decorative reliefs carved into surface stone. These were full-scale architectural excavations that systematically removed tons of solid rock from structurally critical cliff sections while maintaining overall geological stability. The engineering required understanding of rock physics, stress distribution, and geological mechanics that modern structural engineers still use for similar projects. The largest and most complex Lycian tombs feature multiple burial chambers connected by precisely carved corridors with elaborately decorated ceilings that distribute architectural weight across carefully calculated remaining stone support structures. Interior walls show intricate architectural details that required artificial lighting systems to execute properly during the carving process. Stone doors fitted with such precision that they remained perfectly functional for over 2 millennia of use. Modern engineering analysis reveals sophisticated understanding of rock mechanics, fracture pattern prediction, and structural geology principles that ensured excavated chambers wouldn't trigger progressive cliff collapse or geological instability. The strategic positioning of individual tombs follows geological engineering principles rather than purely aesthetic arrangements. Each location carefully chosen based on stone quality assessments, structural stability calculations, and natural drainage considerations. Lycian master architects developed highly specialized tool systems specifically designed for large-scale rock excavation. Bronze picks engineered for efficient limestone cutting, iron chisels designed for detailed decorative work, and mechanical lever systems for removing large stone sections without damaging surrounding rock structures. Toolmark analysis shows systematic excavation techniques that maximized efficiency while maintaining structural integrity throughout the construction process. The tomb construction projects weren't random individual excavations created by amateur stoneworkers. They followed standardized architectural proportions and decorative conventions that clearly indicate centralized design authority and systematic specialist training programs. Apprentice carvers learned precise techniques for creating architectural illusions in solid stone that required years of training and practice. Archaeological evidence suggests Lycian rock-cutting techniques influenced stone architecture throughout the eastern Mediterranean for centuries. Later, Roman and Byzantine builders adopted Lycian excavation methods, tool designs, and structural engineering principles for their own monumental construction projects. The tomb complexes also demonstrate advanced understanding of interior climate control and preservation technology. Internal chamber designs that maintain stable temperatures and humidity levels, drainage systems that prevented water damage, and ventilation techniques that preserved burial goods and human remains for extended periods. Lycian engineers solved complex technical problems that challenged ancient builders throughout the Mediterranean. How to excavate large interior spaces without compromising structural stability. How to create precise architectural details in hard stone using manual tools. How to manage water infiltration in cliff face excavations, and how to maintain long-term structural integrity in challenging geological conditions. The most impressive Lycian tomb complexes required coordinated teams of specialists working together over multiple construction seasons. Geological engineers who assessed cliff stability, master architects who designed complex interior layouts, skilled stonecutters who executed precise excavation work, and project managers who coordinated labor and resource allocation across years of continuous construction activity. Recent archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar and laser measurement technology reveal additional unexcavated tomb complexes hidden beneath centuries of rockfall and vegetation. The complete scope of Lycian rock-cut architecture was likely much more extensive and technically sophisticated than currently visible remains suggest. Modern structural engineers studying Lycian excavation techniques continue to discover innovative solutions for rock cutting and cliff stabilization that have applications for contemporary construction projects in challenging geological environments. To the southeast across the Arabian Peninsula, another ancient kingdom was engineering comprehensive control over water resources and regional climate systems. Dust devils swirl over the ruins of the legendary Ma'rib Dam, where broken stone blocks and crumbling earthwork mark the remains of an engineering leviathan that held an entire civilization together for over 13 centuries. This is Sabian hydraulic engineering, a massive 600-meter dam complex that transformed Arabia's most arid region into agricultural paradise through water management mastery that wouldn't be attempted again for millennia. The official historical narrative reduces ancient Arabs to nomadic tribes who occasionally practiced limited agriculture in scattered desert oases while living a harsh subsistence existence on the margins of more civilized regions. According to textbooks, pre-Islamic Arabia was a cultural backwater where Bedouin herders scratched out survival in one of Earth's most challenging environments. Archaeological investigation of the Ma'rib Dam system proves otherwise, revealing industrial-scale hydraulic engineering that systematically managed seasonal floodwaters, controlled irrigation across thousands of hectares, and sustained large urban populations in the heart of the Arabian Desert from 750 BCE to 570 CE, over 13 centuries of continuous operation. The dam structure itself defied conventional engineering wisdom and challenged the physical limits of ancient construction technology. Built across the Wadi Dana Valley, this massive barrier captured violent flash floods from seasonal mountain rains and systematically distributed precious water through an elaborate canal network that irrigated over 25,000 acres of agricultural land. Not simply a primitive water barrier, but a comprehensive flood management system featuring spillways, adjustable sluice gates, and distribution channels calculated to maximize agricultural productivity while preventing catastrophic flood damage. Royal inscriptions carved into stone monuments record detailed maintenance schedules spanning multiple centuries. Clear evidence of sophisticated bureaucratic planning that could coordinate complex repair projects across multiple generations of rulers. Kings boasted in permanent inscriptions of dam improvements and expansion projects. Communities contributed organized labor for systematic maintenance operations, and religious festivals celebrated successful flood management seasons. This wasn't just utilitarian infrastructure, it became the technological and cultural foundation of an entire civilization. Picture coordinated teams of skilled stoneworkers reinforcing spillway structures during dry seasons, while hydraulic engineers performed complex calculations to determine optimal water flow requirements for upcoming flood cycles. Farmers throughout the region adjusting irrigation channel systems according to seasonal schedules maintained by professional scribes who systematically recorded rainfall patterns, flood levels, and agricultural yields across decades of careful observation. The engineering sophistication, evident in archaeological remains, is genuinely staggering for ancient technology. Stone-reinforced earthen barriers designed to withstand flash floods carrying millions of cubic meters of water mixed with rocks and debris. Overflow channel systems designed to handle 100-year flood events without catastrophic structural failure. Sophisticated sediment management systems that prevented canal blockages while maintaining optimal water flow rates throughout extensive distribution networks. Sabaean urban communities developed around the irrigation system, according to systematic hydraulic planning principles. Towns positioned at mathematically optimal distances from main canal systems. Agricultural zones systematically allocated according to water availability and soil quality assessments. Specialized craft production centers strategically located near reliable water sources for industrial processes. The entire regional settlement pattern followed hydraulic engineering logic rather than defensive military considerations or random commercial development. The dam's economic impact was measurable and transformative on a regional scale. Sabaean agriculture supported large urban populations that included professional military forces, skilled craftsmen, religious hierarchies, and merchant classes. Agricultural surplus funded military campaigns that extended Sabaean political influence across the Red Sea into Ethiopia and northward towards Syria. Generated wealth enabled extensive international trade relationships with Roman merchants, Indian Ocean commercial networks, and East African kingdoms. Archaeological evidence shows the irrigation system supported population densities and agricultural productivity that exceeded many regions of the Roman Empire during the same historical period. Sabaean agricultural techniques sustained intensive cultivation for over a millennium without apparent soil depletion or environmental degradation. When the Great Marib Dam finally suffered catastrophic failure in 570 CE, after over 13 centuries of continuous service, the collapse triggered a civilizational chain reaction that destroyed Sabaean society within a single generation. Communities that had depended on systematic irrigation for over 40 generations suddenly found themselves in an uninhabitable desert environment. They abandoned urban centers that had flourished for centuries and dispersed across Arabia as nomadic populations, carrying hydraulic engineering knowledge that would later influence irrigation systems throughout the emerging Muslim world. Medieval Arabic engineering manuals preserve detailed Sabaean water management formulas, dam construction techniques, and agricultural scheduling methods that were still being consulted by Islamic engineers 1,000 years later. Step back for a moment to consider the broader pattern emerging. Nabateans engineering sophisticated water systems and desert cliffs, Sabaeans controlling massive floodwaters. With precisely calculated dams, the Hohokam building continental irrigation networks across American deserts. These weren't just impressive water management systems, they were comprehensive climate control technologies that created artificial environments and sustainable civilizations where none should naturally exist. In the highlands of Mexico, another ancient culture was transforming metal into mathematical precision and military dominance. Furnace glow illuminates the volcanic highlands of Michoacán, where master metalworkers forge sophisticated bronze alloys that surpass Aztec technology by centuries of development. This is Tarascan metallurgy, the most advanced metalworking achieved in pre-Columbian America, developed by a fiercely independent culture that successfully resisted Aztec conquest when the Triple Alliance controlled most of Mesoamerica through military dominance and tribute extraction. Official historical narratives reduce them to a regional kingdom that resisted Aztec expansion through conventional military organization and favorable defensive geography. According to textbooks, the Tarascan succeeded primarily because mountain terrain made conquest difficult, rather than through technological superiority or innovative engineering. Metallurgical archaeological evidence tells a radically different story of technological achievement and industrial sophistication. Tarascan smiths created complex copper-bronze alloys, advanced casting techniques, and decorative metalwork that exceeded anything produced by their more famous contemporaries throughout Mesoamerica. When Spanish conquistadors first encountered Aztec warriors, they fought with obsidian-edged wooden clubs and quilted cotton armor. Tarascan warriors carried bronze axes, copper-tipped spears, and sophisticated metal armor that made them nearly invulnerable to traditional Mesoamerican weapon systems. Tarascan metallurgical specialists operated furnaces that achieved temperatures necessary for complex bronze alloy production, using forced air combustion systems and specialized fuel mixtures that required systematic knowledge of combustion science and thermal management. Archaeological excavations reveal standardized production centers with clear evidence of organized mass manufacturing, not individual craftsmen working in isolation, but systematically organized workshops producing standardized military equipment and ceremonial objects according to established specifications. The metalworking processes demonstrate systematic scientific understanding rather than random experimentation. Artifact analysis reveals controlled alloy compositions that range from pure copper for decorative items to precisely calculated tin-bronze alloys for tools and weapons. Tarascan smiths clearly understood complex relationships between metal composition and final material properties, systematically adjusting copper-tin ratios according to intended function and performance requirements. Picture master metallurgists working in specialized workshop complexes, teaching carefully selected apprentices to read subtle metal color variations by firelight, calculating precise alloy proportions using standardized copper and tin ingot systems. Coordinated teams of skilled workers operating sophisticated bellows systems, while foundry supervisors directed casting operations that produced identical artifacts across multiple production facilities separated by considerable distances. Tarascan metalwork demonstrates sophisticated understanding of advanced techniques, including lost wax casting for complex shapes, systematic metal finishing methods, and decorative techniques that required specialized tools and imported materials. Archaeological discoveries include copper bells, with precisely tuned acoustic properties, bronze mirrors with polished surfaces that required advanced finishing techniques, and golden ornaments that demonstrate artistic traditions combining technical excellence with aesthetic innovation. Their metallurgical superiority translated directly into military advantage that enabled successful resistance against Aztec expansion. Tarascan armies equipped with bronze weapons consistently defeated Aztec military forces armed with obsidian-edged weapons and wooden implements in every major engagement documented in historical records. Metal armor provided effective protection against traditional Mesoamerican warfare techniques, while copper-bronze alloy tools enabled superior agricultural productivity and construction capabilities. Archaeological evidence reveals Tarascan weapon production included specialized military equipment designed specifically for different combat roles, bronze-headed arrows for long-range warfare, copper-tipped spears for close combat, and metal axes that could penetrate traditional armor systems. This wasn't random metalworking. It was systematic military engineering that created technological advantages in organized warfare. Spanish colonial documentation records extensive Tarascan workshop systems, producing metal goods for trade with neighboring regions throughout western Mexico. Not just local consumption for immediate community needs, but systematic industrial export of superior metalwork that established commercial networks spanning hundreds of miles across diverse cultural boundaries. Tarascan metallurgical techniques influenced Mexican metalworking for centuries after Spanish conquest. Colonial Spanish miners and smiths adopted Tarascan furnace designs, alloy composition methods, and casting techniques for their own industrial operations. Indigenous Mexican metalworkers preserved Tarascan technical knowledge through guild systems that maintained traditional methods alongside European technologies. Recent archaeometallurgical analysis using modern scientific techniques reveals that Tarascan bronze alloys achieved material properties comparable to early European steel production. Their systematic understanding of metallurgical science enabled creation of materials that provided significant advantages in tool performance, weapon effectiveness, and decorative applications. The Tarascan state controlled extensive copper mining operations in Michoacan's volcanic highlands, with systematic extraction techniques that supplied raw materials for large-scale industrial production. Archaeological surveys reveal organized mining, settlements, standardized extraction methods, and transportation networks that carried raw materials to production centers throughout Tarascan territory. Their success demonstrates that technological superiority could enable small political entities to maintain independence against larger imperial powers through systematic innovation and industrial organization. Tarascan metallurgy created economic prosperity, military advantages, and cultural achievements that sustained political autonomy for over 3 centuries. Northward across the Great Continental Divide, ancient engineers were arranging earth and timber to mirror cosmic patterns and create America's first planned urban center. Morning fog rolls across the massive earthen pyramid known as Monk's Mound, while wooden post circles mark astronomical alignments with mathematical precision that rivals modern GPS-guided observatories. This is Cahokia, North America's largest pre-Columbian urban center, home to over 20,000 people when medieval London housed barely 15,000, built by sophisticated engineers who understood urban planning principles, astronomical calculation, and massive earthwork construction on a truly continental scale. The official archaeological narrative reduces it to a Mississippian culture village that practiced seasonal agriculture and built some ceremonial earthen mounds. According to textbooks, Cahokia represents an interesting but ultimately primitive example of early North American settlement that achieved limited success through favorable geographic location near fertile river bottomland. Archaeological investigation reveals something far more sophisticated than conventional academic descriptions suggest. Cahokia was America's first systematically planned metropolis, featuring zoned residential districts, precise astronomical alignments, and earthwork engineering that required mathematical knowledge and organizational capabilities rivaling any contemporary civilization anywhere in the world. Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthwork constructed north of Mexico, contains over 22 million cubic feet of carefully selected earth, moved in precisely calculated layers without pack animals, wheeled vehicles, or metal tools. This wasn't a random accumulation of soil. It represents systematically engineered architecture featuring internal drainage systems, calculated slope requirements, and foundation preparations that have successfully prevented erosion for over 1,000 years of environmental exposure. The mound construction process required sophisticated understanding of soil mechanics, load distribution principles, and hydrological engineering that enabled creation of stable platforms capable of supporting massive wooden superstructures. Each individual basket of earth was placed according to predetermined specifications that created optimal stability while minimizing long-term settling problems. Core sampling analysis reveals systematic layering techniques that optimize structural integrity across multiple construction phases. Picture coordinated teams carrying countless baskets of earth along carefully planned routes, while engineering supervisors directed placement according to survey marks established using standardized cord and stake measuring systems. Master builders performing complex slope calculations and drainage pattern analysis, while specialized workers shaped terraces and access walkways that connected the Great Mound to surrounding plazas and residential districts. The famous Woodhenge Astronomical Observatory demonstrates mathematical precision and surveying accuracy that challenges modern technological capabilities. Wooden posts positioned to mark solstices, equinoxes, and complex astronomical cycles, with accuracy measured in precise degrees of arc. These weren't accidental alignments or approximate positioning. They represent systematic astronomical observations that require decades of sky watching and sophisticated mathematical calculation. Cahokia's comprehensive urban planning followed advanced zoning principles that efficiently organized diverse activities across the metropolitan area. Elite residential compounds strategically concentrated on elevated mound platforms, specialized craft production areas systematically segregated by material type and manufacturing function, agricultural zones systematically allocated according to soil quality assessments and water availability. The entire settlement pattern followed logical social and functional organization rather than random organic growth. The Grand Plaza, a massive 40-acre artificially leveled space positioned at the city's geometric center, required earth-moving techniques that demanded surveying knowledge and coordinated labor management on an unprecedented scale. This wasn't simply cleared ground. It represents engineered public space specifically designed for large-scale ceremonies, organized markets, and community gatherings that served the entire metropolitan population. Archaeological evidence suggests Cahokia's population exceeded most contemporary European cities, with organized residential districts, specialized craft production quarters, and extensive agricultural suburbs that stretched for miles along the fertile Mississippi River floodplain. The urban infrastructure supported complex economic activities, long-distance trade networks, and social stratification comparable to medieval European cities. Recent archaeological surveys using modern remote sensing technology reveal the true scope of Cahokia's urban planning. Organized residential areas extending much farther than previously recognized, systematic agricultural field arrangements that optimized crop production, and integrated transportation networks that connected the metropolitan center to satellite communities throughout the region. The city's astronomical alignments connected local architecture to continental landscape features and cosmic cycles, suggesting systematic understanding of geography, astronomy, and mathematics that enabled precise orientation across vast distances. Major buildings aligned not just with local horizon markers, but with distant geographic features and celestial phenomena that required continental-scale surveying knowledge. Cahokia's influence extended throughout the Mississippi River Valley and beyond, with architectural techniques, urban planning principles, and astronomical knowledge spreading to dozens of smaller centers across the American Midwest and Southeast. Archaeological evidence shows standardized construction methods, shared measurement systems, and coordinated astronomical observations across multiple sites separated by hundreds of miles. Around 1350 CE, Cahokia was systematically abandoned, according to organized planning, rather than sudden catastrophe or external conquest. The metropolitan population dispersed across the Mississippi and Missouri River systems in coordinated groups, carrying sophisticated urban planning knowledge that influenced Native American settlement patterns for centuries throughout the continental interior. Archaeological analysis suggests the abandonment was voluntary and organized, possibly due to environmental changes, resource management challenges, or social reorganization that favored smaller, more distributed communities over concentrated urban centers. At this point, the global pattern stops looking like coincidence and starts revealing something far more systematic and profound about ancient human capabilities. Dawn light slips across the deserts of Turkmenistan, revealing citadels half swallowed by sand that once housed the most sophisticated metallurgists of Central Asia. For decades, the official line was simple. Central Asia was a crossroads, a backwater, never a center of innovation. But at Gonur Tepe and nearby sites, archaeologists found something that challenges every assumption about Bronze Age development. Fortified compounds arranged in perfect rectangles, standardized workshops with evidence of mass production, and goldwork so intricate it rivals anything produced in Mesopotamia or Egypt, except it was created in what textbooks call peripheral territory. The Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, BMAC, shows controlled alloy mixtures that required understanding of metallurgy and materials science, silver-gold alloys calculated to specific ratios, copper-bronze compositions adjusted for different tool types, and precision casting techniques that produced identical artifacts across multiple sites spanning hundreds of miles. Picture goldsmiths working by lamplight, their fingers manipulating precious metals with tools designed for microscopic detail work, furnaces maintaining exact temperatures, while apprentices operated bellows systems according to master craftsmen specifications. These weren't amateur metallurgists learning their trade. These were industrial specialists producing luxury goods for continental distribution. The citadels themselves show urban planning sophistication, gridded streets, segregated craft quarters, centralized storage facilities, and defensive systems that protected workshop areas from raids while maintaining trade access. The entire settlement pattern prioritized production and security over monumental display. Their iconography traveled along early Silk Road networks, appearing in artifacts from Afghanistan to Iran to the Caucasus. Not random cultural exchange, systematic trade relationships that carried BMA's technological knowledge across Eurasia. They weren't bypassed by civilization, they were crafting it. Twilight settles over South Africa's High Veld as ancient masks emerge from red earth, smooth, deliberate, ritualistic objects that speak of ceramic mastery achieved 1,500 years ago by people officially dismissed as simple pastoralists. The Leidenberg ceramics tell a different story. These aren't crude folk pottery attempts. They're precisely engineered ceramic artifacts that required controlled firing techniques, standardized clay preparation, and artistic traditions passed down through generations of specialist craftsmen. The famous Leidenberg heads, 7 hollow ceramic masks discovered in Mpumalanga, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of clay chemistry, firing temperatures, and structural engineering. Each mask was coiled from specially prepared clay, dried according to calculated schedules, then fired in kilns that maintained optimal temperatures without cracking the complex forms. The firing techniques required understanding of oxygen flow, temperature control, and ceramic chemistry that wouldn't be formalized in European pottery until medieval times. The masks show evidence of controlled reduction firing, techniques that produce specific color patterns through deliberate manipulation of kiln atmosphere. Picture ceramic specialists working in seasonal workshops, their hands shaping clay according to proportional systems that created uniform results across multiple production cycles. Master potters teaching apprentices to read kiln temperatures by flame color, while assistants maintain steady firing conditions through days-long firing cycles. The iconography suggests religious or ceremonial functions, but the technical execution proves systematic craft production. Uniform wall thickness, standardized proportions, and consistent firing results indicate quality control and specialist training rather than amateur experimentation. Archaeological evidence shows Lydenburg ceramic techniques influenced pottery traditions across southern Africa for centuries. Later cultures adopted Lydenburg firing methods, clay preparation techniques, and decorative conventions. Their clay carried mathematics, proportional systems that created visual harmony while maintaining structural integrity. Under the burning Sudanese sun, steep-sided pyramids cast razor-sharp shadows across desert landscapes, where Kushite engineers achieved architectural feats that surpassed their more famous Egyptian neighbors. History textbooks center Egypt while treating Kush as an afterthought, a client kingdom that imitated Egyptian architectural styles. Yet, Kushite pyramids at Meroe, Nuri, and Jebel Barkal demonstrate unique engineering logic that solved architectural problems Egyptian builders couldn't. Narrow bases supporting steep slopes that required precise load calculations. Deep subterranean chambers carved into bedrock with mathematical accuracy. And construction techniques that achieve structural stability using less material than comparable Egyptian monuments. The Pyramid of King Taharka at Nuri stands 51 meters tall on a base only 51.75 meters square, proportions that pushed ancient engineering to its limits. The steep angle required understanding of center of gravity, load distribution, and stone-cutting precision that left no margin for error. Picture Kushite architects calculating stone placement, while quarry workers extracted precisely dimensioned blocks from Nubian sandstone cliffs. Master builders directing construction crews who understood weight distribution and structural engineering well enough to build pyramids that have stood for 2,500 years. Kushite gold mines at Wadi al-Aki reveal complex extraction channels and smelting sites with standardized furnaces that processed precious metals on industrial scales. Not random prospecting, systematic mining operations that supplied gold for international trade networks reaching from sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean. Royal inscriptions document iron production, military engineering, and skilled labor guilds that maintain technical knowledge across generations of Kushite rulers. The kingdom wasn't imitating Egypt. It was developing parallel technologies that often surpassed Egyptian capabilities. Their architectural innovations influenced Nubian building traditions for over a millennium. Medieval Sudanese churches incorporated Kushite proportional systems and construction techniques. They didn't copy Egypt. They redefined it in silence. The humid heat of southwestern Iran presses against the ziggurats of Susa, massive, deliberate structures that rise from Mesopotamian plains like manufactured mountains designed to control both water and political power. Steam rises from ancient irrigation channels where morning mist mingles with the ghosts of an empire that mastered hydraulic engineering millennia before modern hydrology became a science. Official narratives dismiss Elam as peripheral to Mesopotamian civilization, a tributary culture that borrowed architectural styles from the more famous Sumerian and Babylonian cities. According to textbooks, the Elamites were provincial imitators who copied superior technologies from their more civilized neighbors, adding little original innovation to human development. But archaeological evidence tells a radically different story. Elamite engineers achieved hydraulic and architectural innovations that not only preceded Mesopotamian development, but directly influenced the very civilizations that supposedly taught them everything. They weren't students. They were teachers whose lessons were forgotten when their empire fell. The ziggurat at Choga Zanbil, ancient Dur Untash, stands as testament to engineering sophistication that challenges every assumption about Bronze Age capabilities. This isn't just a massive religious monument. It's a comprehensive water management system disguised as a temple. Internal drainage networks channel seasonal floodwaters through precisely calculated conduits that prevent structural damage while collecting and distributing water for urban consumption. Picture Elamite hydraulic engineers working by torchlight in underground chambers, their calculations etched into clay tablets as they designed drainage systems that would function automatically during unpredictable flood seasons. Master builders directing teams of specialized workers who understood load distribution, water pressure dynamics, and structural engineering well enough to create monuments that have survived for over 3,000 years. The construction required mathematical planning that coordinated millions of sun-dried bricks according to architectural specifications, spanning decades of building campaigns. Not random construction driven by religious fervor, systematic engineering that created stable platforms capable of supporting massive superstructures while managing complex hydraulic requirements. Each brick was positioned according to detailed plans that accounted for settling rates, thermal expansion, and water pressure loads. Multi-level urban platforms demonstrate understanding of flood control that elevated important buildings above seasonal water levels, while maintaining convenient access to river transportation and agricultural areas. The Elamites solved the fundamental urban planning problem: how to live with unpredictable rivers that provide life-giving water but threaten destruction during flood seasons. Elamite hydraulic systems used gravity-fed channels, underground aqueducts, and distribution networks that supplied fresh water to urban populations, while simultaneously managing agricultural irrigation across thousands of acres. The engineering knowledge required sophisticated understanding of fluid dynamics, gradient calculations, sediment control, and maintenance scheduling that kept complex systems functional across centuries of use. Archaeological excavations reveal standardized ceramic pipes, bronze fittings, and stone channel systems that provided municipal water services to residential districts throughout Elamite cities. Not elite luxury amenities, comprehensive urban infrastructure that treated water access as a basic requirement for civilized urban life. Picture Elamite urban planners positioning residential districts according to hydraulic accessibility, their decisions based on topographic surveys and water flow calculations that optimize both convenience and flood safety. Engineers directing construction of underground aqueducts, while surveyors established gradient requirements for channels that had to maintain steady flow across miles of varied terrain. The famous royal city of Susa demonstrates integrated urban planning that combined defensive requirements, ceremonial functions, and hydraulic necessities into a single comprehensive system. Palace complexes positioned to control water distribution while maintaining visual command over agricultural areas and transportation routes. Administrative efficiency married to hydraulic engineering. Clay tablets discovered in Elamite archives detail administrative oversight systems that coordinated skilled workshops, maintained quality standards, and preserved engineering knowledge across multiple construction projects spanning generations. These weren't random building campaigns. They were systematically planned infrastructure programs that required bureaucratic sophistication and technical knowledge preservation. The tablets record specialized labor hierarchies: master hydraulic engineers, stone-cutting specialists, bronze-working craftsmen, and surveying teams who maintain technical standards across multiple sites. Professional engineering guilds that preserved knowledge through apprenticeship systems and written technical manuals. Elamite innovations influenced hydraulic engineering throughout the ancient Near East. Mesopotamian cities adopted Elamite water management techniques, Persian engineers incorporated Elamite architectural principles, and later, Islamic hydraulic systems preserved Elamite gradient calculations and distribution methods. When Persian armies finally conquered Elam, they didn't destroy Elamite engineering knowledge, they absorbed it. Persian royal inscriptions boast of water management projects that use techniques originally developed by Elamite engineers centuries earlier. The conquerors became students of the people they conquered. Modern archaeological surveys using SOAP, ground-penetrating radar, reveal the true scope of Elamite hydraulic engineering. underground aqueduct networks that extend far beyond visible surface remains, distribution systems that supplied water to urban populations larger than previously estimated, and agricultural irrigation networks that supported regional populations for over a millennium. The ziggurat complex at Choga Zanbil contains over 50 separate water management features. Overflow channels, settling basins, distribution networks, and drainage systems that operated as an integrated hydraulic machine. Engineering complexity that required mathematical calculations, systematic planning, and maintenance protocols spanning multiple generations of technical specialists. Cuneiform inscriptions describe Elamite water festivals, where communities celebrated successful flood management and agricultural irrigation. Religious ceremonies that were actually engineering appreciation events, public recognition of the technical achievements that sustained civilization in challenging environments. They were architects of water long before Persia rose to regional dominance, creating hydraulic technologies that sustained civilizations for thousands of years after Elamite political power vanished into historical footnotes. Their engineering legacy flows through every subsequent Persian garden, every Islamic fountain, every modern Iranian irrigation system. The Elamites remind us that technological innovation doesn't always come from the civilizations that end up in textbooks. Sometimes the most advanced engineering belongs to the empires that history forgot. Dust swirls over the ruins of the Ma'rib Dam, where broken stones mark the remains of an engineering leviathan that held an entire civilization together for over 13 centuries. We've glimpsed this marvel before, but the full scope of Sabaean hydraulic engineering deserves deeper examination because this wasn't just one impressive dam, it was the cornerstone of the most sophisticated water management system in the ancient world, a technological achievement that supported an entire civilization through the rise and fall of empires. The official narrative treats ancient Arabia as a land of nomadic tribes who occasionally practiced limited agriculture in scattered oases while living a harsh existence on the margins of more civilized regions. According to textbooks, pre-Islamic Arabia was a cultural backwater where Bedouin herders scratched out subsistence living in one of Earth's most hostile environments. But the Ma'rib Dam system shatters these assumptions completely. This was industrial-scale hydraulic engineering that transformed Yemen's most arid region into the agricultural powerhouse of a sophisticated kingdom that rivaled Rome and Persia in wealth, military power, and technological sophistication. The dam complex itself defied every rule of ancient engineering. The main barrier stretched nearly 600 meters across the Wadi Hana, a massive stone and earth construction that captured seasonal flash floods carrying millions of cubic meters of water and debris. Not a simple wall across a river, but a comprehensive flood management system with spillways, sluice gates, distribution channels, and overflow protection that manage the unpredictable violence of Arabian flash floods. Picture the scale of coordination required during construction. Thousands of workers quarrying fitted stone blocks during dry seasons, while engineers calculated water pressure loads and structural requirements for barriers that had to withstand centuries of flood cycles. Master builders directing teams who shaped massive stones without metal tools, positioned them with mathematical precision, and sealed joints with lime mortar that has outlasted most modern concrete. The dam complex included multiple secondary barriers that controlled tributary valleys, creating a coordinated network of water capture and distribution across thousands of square miles. Tertiary channels distributed precious water to agricultural areas positioned according to elevation gradients and soil quality assessments that required systematic surveying and agricultural science. The engineering sophistication becomes clear in the details. Stone-reinforced earthen barriers designed to flex during floods without catastrophic failure. Spillways calculated to handle 100-year flood events while protecting structural integrity. Sediment management systems that prevented canal blockages through controlled flow velocities and settling chambers. The hydraulic calculations required understanding of fluid dynamics, materials science, and structural engineering that wouldn't be formalized in textbooks for another millennium. Royal inscriptions carved into stone monuments record specific maintenance schedules with bureaucratic precision that rivals modern infrastructure management. spillway cleaning every 3 years, structural reinforcement every decade, complete renovations every generation. This level of institutional planning required administrative systems that preserved technical knowledge across centuries of dynastic changes, political upheavals, and economic fluctuations. The maintenance programs weren't ceremonial, they were essential. Archaeological evidence shows systematic repairs, upgrades, and modifications that kept the system functional for over 13 centuries. Specialized engineering guilds maintained technical knowledge through apprenticeship programs and written manuals that preserved hydraulic expertise across generations of dynastic succession. The economic impact was measurable and staggering. Sabaean agriculture supported urban populations that included professional armies, skilled craftsmen, religious hierarchies, and merchant classes. The agricultural surplus funded military campaigns that extended Sabaean influence across the Red Sea into Ethiopia and north towards Syria, generated surplus wealth that enabled international trade relationships with Roman merchants, Indian Ocean commercial networks, and East African kingdoms. Water security became the foundation of regional political power in ways that transformed Arabian geopolitics. Control of the dam meant control of agricultural production, which meant control of population centers, trade revenues, and military resources. The Sabaean kingdom's diplomatic correspondence with Rome and Byzantium shows how hydraulic engineering translated directly into international political influence. Sabaean communities developed around the irrigation system in carefully planned networks, towns positioned at optimal distances from main canals, agricultural zones allocated according to water availability and soil fertility, craft production centers located near reliable water sources for industrial processes. The entire settlement pattern followed hydraulic logic rather than defensive or commercial considerations. The system supported international commerce on a scale that connected Arabia with global trade networks. Sabaean merchants used agricultural wealth to finance trading expeditions to India, China, and the Mediterranean. Their irrigation-based prosperity enabled them to control frankincense and myrrh trade routes that generated additional wealth for kingdom expansion. Inscriptions describe water festivals where communities celebrated successful flood management and agricultural abundance, religious ceremonies that were actually engineering appreciation events, public recognition of the technical achievements that sustained civilization in one of Earth's most challenging environments. When the Great Dam finally failed in 570 CE, after over 13 centuries of continuous service, the collapse triggered a civilizational chain reaction that destroyed Sabaean society within a single generation. Communities that had depended on irrigation for over 40 generations suddenly found themselves in a desert. They abandoned cities that had flourished for centuries and dispersed across Arabia, carrying hydraulic knowledge that would influence irrigation systems throughout the emerging Muslim world. Medieval Arabic engineering manuals preserved Sabaean water management formulas, dam construction techniques, and canal design principles that were still being consulted by Islamic hydraulic engineers 1,000 years later. Their technological legacy lived on even as their civilization vanished into legend. The Marib Dam didn't just hold water, it held an entire world together. And when it finally broke, that world collapsed so completely that most people today have never heard the name Sabaean, never learned that ancient Arabia once engineered agricultural abundance in the heart of the desert. High in the Oaxacan highlands, atop a flattened mountain peak, Monte Alban spreads across artificial terraces that seem to defy gravity and common sense. Morning mist clings to stone platforms that rise in impossible geometric precision from what was once a jagged mountain ridge. This isn't a city built on a mountain. This is a mountain completely redesigned to become a three-dimensional calendar aligned with the cosmos itself. The official story dismisses it as a regional center that dominated the Oaxaca Valley through conventional political organization and trade control. According to textbooks, Monte Alban was just another Mesoamerican ceremonial site where local chiefs built temples to impress their subjects and control regional commerce. Reality reveals something far more staggering. The Zapotecs undertook one of the most ambitious landscape modification projects in ancient America, literally carving an entire mountain into an urban platform that functioned as both city and astronomical observatory. This wasn't construction, it was geological surgery performed with stone tools and mathematical precision. The main plaza alone required moving over 500,000 cubic meters of stone and earth to create a perfectly flat ceremonial space, measuring 300 by 150 meters on what was originally a jagged mountain ridge studded with peaks and valleys. Not just clearing vegetation or leveling small areas, complete topographic redesign that created artificial building platforms, sophisticated drainage systems, and access routes that have functioned flawlessly for over 2,000 years. Picture teams of thousands of workers carrying stone and woven baskets along carefully planned routes, while engineering supervisors directed earth-moving operations, according to surveyed plans that coordinated multiple construction zones across the entire mountain. Master architects calculating platform positions and plaza orientations, while astronomers verified celestial alignments that connected every major structure to specific cosmic cycles. The astronomical alignments are precise beyond any possibility of coincidence. Building axes oriented to solstice sunrises with accuracy measured in degrees of arc, plaza arrangements that mirror constellation patterns visible during crucial ceremonial dates, and carefully calculated sightlines that frame specific mountains on the horizon during astronomical events. Monte Alban wasn't just built on a mountain. It was designed as a massive three-dimensional calendar that integrated architecture with astronomy and geography. The ball court complexes demonstrate acoustic engineering sophistication that created perfect sound transmission across the playing fields. Modern sound experiments show that conversations at one end of the court can be heard clearly at the opposite end, 150 meters away. Acoustic design that enhanced both ritual ceremonies and sporting events through engineered reverberation and sound focusing. Underground tunnel systems connect major buildings through passages carved directly into solid bedrock, using bronze tools and controlled fire techniques. These weren't defensive hideouts or storage areas. They were integrated circulation systems that allowed discrete movement between ceremonial areas during complex ritual sequences that might last for days and involve hundreds of participants. The famous carved danzante figures, over 300 stone reliefs showing human figures in various dynamic poses, represent sophisticated early Zapotec writing systems that recorded historical events, astronomical observations, and political relationships across generations of rulers. Not random artistic decoration or primitive cave paintings, systematic information storage using visual symbols that functioned as historical archives carved in permanent stone. Zapotec engineers solved complex problems that challenged ancient builders throughout the Americas: how to create stable platforms on sloped terrain, how to manage water drainage during seasonal rains, how to prevent erosion of artificial terraces, and how to maintain structural integrity during earthquakes that regularly shake the region. The residential areas demonstrate urban planning principles that provided housing for estimated populations of 15,000, 25,000 people across different social levels. Elite compounds positioned according to astronomical alignments and ceremonial requirements. Craft production areas located near water sources and transportation routes, and agricultural terraces that maximized food production on steep mountain slopes. Water management systems included cisterns, drainage channels, and collection systems that captured and stored rainwater during seasonal wet periods for use during dry months. Hydraulic engineering that sustained urban populations in highland environments where water security determined survival. Archaeological evidence shows Monte Alban functioned as a regional capital that coordinated political and economic relationships across the Oaxaca Valley for over a millennium. Not an isolated ceremonial center, but the administrative hub of a complex state system that managed trade networks, tribute collection, and military operations across hundreds of communities. When Monte Alban was eventually abandoned around 750 CE, the population migrated to valley locations rather than maintaining the mountaintop city. But Zapotec architectural innovations influenced urban planning throughout Mesoamerica. Platform construction techniques, astronomical alignment methods, and ceremonial space design that appear in later Maya, Aztec, and other regional civilizations. They redesigned an entire mountain for their calendar and their gods, creating urban architecture that treated massive landscape modification as routine engineering. Monte Alban stands as proof that ancient Americans possessed surveying knowledge, mathematical skills, and organizational capabilities that rival modern urban planning projects. Arizona's sun beats down mercilessly on canal systems so straight and precisely graded they could have been surveyed with laser equipment and GPS coordinates. These are Hohokam waterways, over 1,000 miles of irrigation channels that transform the Sonoran Desert into agricultural paradise, using engineering techniques that wouldn't be equaled in the American Southwest for another 1,000 years after their civilization vanished. Official history dismisses them as early agriculturists who adapted to desert conditions through innovative farming techniques. According to textbooks, the Hohokam were primitive farmers who dug some ditches to water their crops and managed to survive in harsh conditions through luck and persistence. Archaeological evidence reveals something far more sophisticated: systematic hydraulic engineering that managed water resources across an area larger than modern Phoenix using mathematical calculations, geological knowledge, and materials science that enabled sustainable agriculture in one of North America's most challenging environments. The main canal systems follow gradients so precise they maintain steady water flow across dozens of miles without pumps, locks, or any mechanical devices. These aren't approximate measurements. They're engineering tolerances that were off by even small percentages would have resulted in either stagnant pools breeding disease or destructive floods destroying crops and settlements. The Hohokam achieved hydraulic engineering accuracies measured in inches per mile across continental distances, using only hand tools and manual surveying techniques. Picture specialized survey teams using knotted cord measuring systems and wooden stakes to establish elevation markers across miles of desert terrain, while hydraulic engineers calculated water flow requirements for agricultural areas positioned dozens of miles downstream from river sources. Master canal diggers excavating channels according to precise specifications, while water management specialists installed sophisticated gates and flow regulators that controlled distribution according to seasonal requirements and community agreements. The irrigation system included sediment traps that prevented canal blockage during flash floods, overflow channels that managed seasonal water surges without destroying infrastructure, and complex distribution networks that allocated precious water according to agricultural needs, population requirements, and political agreements negotiated between communities. Not simple irrigation ditches, comprehensive water management infrastructure that sustained over 100,000 people in one of North America's most water-scarce environments. Hohokam settlements were positioned according to strict hydraulic logic rather than defensive or commercial considerations. Communities located at mathematically optimal distances from main canal systems, residential areas elevated precisely above seasonal flood levels, and specialized craft production centers positioned near reliable water sources required for ceramic manufacturing, textile production, and food processing. The canal maintenance programs required coordinated labor across multiple communities and generations of technical specialists. Archaeological evidence shows systematic dredging operations, structural repairs, and gradual system expansions that maintained functionality for over 1,000 years through climate variations, population changes, and political upheavals. Hohokam engineers understood desert hydrology in ways that enabled them to predict and manage seasonal water availability, flash flood timing, and groundwater fluctuations. They developed water storage systems, infiltration management techniques, and agricultural scheduling that optimize crop production while preventing soil salinization that destroys desert irrigation systems. Their agricultural success supported specialized craft production, long-distance trade networks, and social stratification that created one of North America's most complex prehistoric civilizations. Hohokam artisans produced elaborate pottery, intricate textiles, sophisticated jewelry, and ceremonial objects that were traded across the Southwest and into Mexico. Archaeological surveys using modern remote sensing technology reveal the true scope of Hohokam hydraulic engineering, canal networks that extend far beyond previously mapped areas, distribution systems that supplied water to agricultural zones covering thousands of square miles, and water management infrastructure that supported regional population densities higher than many areas achieve today. The Hohokam developed sustainable desert agriculture that maintained soil fertility and water availability across centuries of continuous use. Their farming techniques prevented the environmental degradation that destroys most irrigation-dependent civilizations, suggesting sophisticated understanding of desert ecology and long-term resource management. When Hohokam civilization declined around 1450 CE, possibly due to climate change, social conflicts, or system maintenance failures, the canal systems were systematically abandoned and eventually buried by desert sediments and flash flood deposits. Spanish colonists arriving in the 1600s found traces of ancient waterways and attempted to resurrect them for their own agricultural projects. But the Spanish lacked the engineering knowledge to maintain the complex gradients, flow control systems, and maintenance protocols that kept Hohokam canals functional. Their attempts at restoration failed repeatedly, and most Spanish settlements in central Arizona were eventually abandoned due to water management problems the Hohokam had solved centuries earlier. Modern Phoenix uses some canal routes originally established by Hohokam engineers over 1,000 years ago. Contemporary Arizona agriculture still struggles with problems: soil salinization, water, distribution, flash flood management that Hohokam technology solved using techniques that have been lost to history. They built a water empire where water should not exist, using engineering technology that disappeared completely when their civilization collapsed, leaving only traces of impossible precision buried beneath one of America's fastest-growing metropolitan areas. Morning haze lifts from the Avenue of the Dead, revealing a city that housed 200,000 people in carefully planned districts, while most of the world's population lived in villages of fewer than 1,000. This is Teotihuacan, the first planned metropolis in the Americas, built by architects whose names we'll never know because they left behind a city without writing, without obvious rulers, without any of the usual markers of ancient power. The official narrative, a major cultural center that influenced Mesoamerican development through trade and religious innovation. The truth is more unsettling. Teotihuacan represents urban planning on a scale that wouldn't be attempted again in the Americas for over 1,000 years, achieved by a civilization that erased its own identity so completely that we don't even know what they called themselves. The Avenue of the Dead stretches 2.4 kilometers in perfect alignment with the constellation the Pleiades when it crossed the meridian at midnight. Not approximate alignment, precise mathematical correlation between urban architecture and astronomical phenomena. The entire city functions as a three-dimensional star map laid out across 20 square kilometers of Mexican plateau. The Pyramid of the Sun contains 1.2 million tons of stone and earth arranged according to mathematical ratios that create perfect acoustic properties. Sound experiments show that claps at specific locations produce echoes that mimic the calls of sacred animals: quetzal birds, jaguars, rain serpents. Acoustic architecture that transformed the entire pyramid into a musical instrument. Picture architects working by torchlight, calculating stone placement according to proportional systems that integrated acoustics, astronomy, and structural engineering. Construction crews moving massive basalt blocks using rope and lever systems, while surveyors maintained alignment tolerances measured in degrees of arc. The residential compounds, over 2,000 apartment complexes housing the city's population, demonstrate urban planning sophistication that provided running water, drainage, and private courtyards for every family. Not elite housing surrounded by slums, integrated urban infrastructure that treated all residents as worthy of sophisticated amenities. Multi-level drainage systems carried rainwater and wastewater through channels carved directly into bedrock. Stormwater management that prevented flooding while filtering and distributing fresh water throughout the residential areas. Hydrological engineering that functioned without maintenance for centuries. The Obsidian workshops mass-produced stone tools using standardized techniques that created identical artifacts across dozens of production centers. Not individual craftsmen working in isolation. Industrial manufacturing that supplied obsidian implements to communities throughout Mesoamerica. Isotope studies of human remains reveal a multicultural population, with people from across Mesoamerica living in integrated neighborhoods, not ethnic segregation, cosmopolitan communities that's treated cultural diversity as an urban asset rather than a management problem. Around 750 CE, Teotihuacan was systematically abandoned, not destroyed by conquest, not buried by natural disaster, evacuated according to what appears to have been organized planning. The population dispersed across Mexico, carrying urban planning knowledge but never again attempting metropolitan construction on this scale. They engineered a metropolis without leaving a name behind, creating the most sophisticated city in ancient America while remaining completely anonymous. Picture a cold Hungarian dawn, frost clinging to ornate gold belt buckles, buried with warriors whose graves contain metallurgical treasures that represent the convergence of Eastern and Western technological traditions. Official history dismisses the Avars as raiders and nomadic invaders, who disrupted early medieval European development through military conquest. Metallurgical analysis tells a different story. Avar metalwork represents the most sophisticated fusion of Asian and European technologies in early medieval history, achieving alloy compositions and decorative techniques that wouldn't appear elsewhere for centuries. Their lamellar armor systems use precisely calculated steel plates joined with bronze rivets and leather strips that provided maximum protection while maintaining battlefield mobility. Not random metal plates, systematically engineered armor systems that required understanding of metallurgy, materials science, and ergonomic design. The famous Alvar treasure hoards contain goldwork, demonstrating microscopic granulation techniques, silver alloy compositions optimized for specific decorative effects, and iron implements with carbon content precisely controlled for different applications. This wasn't crude barbarian metalwork. This was industrial quality engineering that combined technologies from China, Persia, Byzantium, and Western Europe. Picture specialized craftsmen working in seasonal workshops, their techniques blending Eastern Silk Road metallurgy with European ironworking traditions. Master smiths teaching apprentices to create composite bows with recurved limbs that required understanding of wood physics, horn properties, and sinew behavior. Avar grave goods show technological sophistication, spanning continental distances. Chinese silk, Persian silver, Byzantine gold, Frankish iron, all worked according to Avar specifications that improved upon original techniques. Not random cultural borrowing, systematic technological integration. Their horse gear represents the pinnacle of steppe engineering, stirrups designed for maximum cavalry efficiency, saddle systems that distributed weight optimally, bit designs that provided precise control while minimizing animal stress. The Avar Khaganate collapsed around 800 CE, but their technological legacy shaped medieval European development for centuries. Carolingian metalworkers adopted Avar alloy techniques. Byzantine engineers incorporated Avar siege engine innovations. Their metallurgy became diplomacy, warfare, and identity, smelted into form. Melted, monsoon clouds reflect in the vast West Barre, a reservoir so enormous it reads like an inland sea, its 16 square kilometer surface mirroring temples and palaces that rise from engineered landscapes shaped by the most ambitious hydraulic project in human history. Official history acknowledges Khmer architecture as monumental, but focuses on Angkor Wat's religious significance and artistic achievements. The hydraulic truth is more staggering. Angkor was a machine, a 1,000 square kilometer hydrological system that managed water for over 1 million people while maintaining agricultural productivity in tropical environments that defeated most other civilizations. The West Barre alone contains 50 million cubic meters of water stored in a reservoir that required excavating and moving 15 million cubic meters of earth. Not a natural lake, a completely artificial water storage system built with mathematical precision that maintained optimal water levels through decade-long drought cycles and monsoon floods. LiDAR mapping reveals the true scope of Khmer engineering, a grid of canals, reservoirs, dikes, and distribution channels that extends far beyond the famous temple complexes. Urban infrastructure that integrated water management, transportation, agriculture, and religious architecture into a single comprehensive system. Picture thousands of workers excavating channels during dry seasons, while engineers calculated gradient requirements for waterways that had to maintain steady flow across hundreds of square kilometers of tropical terrain. Hydraulic architects directing construction of spillways, sluice gates, and distribution networks that would function automatically once monsoon rains filled the system. The temple reservoirs weren't just ceremonial, they were functional components of the hydraulic machine. Water stored around temples was blessed, filtered, and distributed to agricultural areas according to religious calendars that optimized both spiritual and practical requirements. Angkor's population's density exceeded modern Bangkok in areas served by the hydraulic system. Urban planning that supported over 750,000 people per square kilometer in the central districts, while maintaining agricultural productivity that fed the entire population. The system functioned through understanding of hydrology, soil science, and climate management that treated water as a strategic resource requiring systematic engineering rather than random exploitation. Seasonal schedules coordinated agricultural planting with religious festivals and hydraulic maintenance to optimize productivity across multiple years. When the hydraulic system finally failed due to climate change, siltation, and maintenance failures, Khmer civilization collapsed within a generation. The population abandoned Angkor and moved to locations with simpler water access, never again attempting hydrological engineering on this scale. They engineered a megacity centuries before Europe could imagine one, using water management technology that turned tropical Cambodia into the most densely populated region on Earth. Wind pushes dust across the ruins of vanished caravanserai, where Sogdian merchants once coordinated commercial operations, spanning from China to Constantinople. History remembers them as traders and middlemen, but archaeological evidence reveals systematic technological innovation that treated long-distance commerce as engineering science. The Sogdians developed coded contract systems using multiple languages and standardized terminology that prevented commercial fraud across cultural boundaries. Archaeological excavations reveal standardized packing methods, weights, and measures that created quality control for transcontinental trade. Their letters, preserved in desert conditions along the Silk Road, document sophisticated accounting systems, banking networks, and commercial law that regulated trade relationships across thousands of miles. Not random merchant activity, systematically engineered commercial technology that transformed Eurasian trade from occasional adventure into routine business. Picture Sogdian accountants working by lamplight, their fingers calculating exchange rates and profit margins using mathematical techniques that optimize caravan loading and route selection. Commercial engineers who treated trade routes like transportation infrastructure, requiring systematic management and quality control. They treated commerce like engineering, turning the Silk Road into their machine. Mist curls around Sumatra's rivers as ancient docks disappear underwater, marking harbors where Southeast Asia's first maritime empire coordinated naval operations across the South China Sea and Indian Ocean. Official history calls Srivijaya a maritime kingdom that controlled trade routes through naval power and commercial agreements. The reality represents the first systematic application of monsoon science to deep ocean navigation. Srivijaya's power was based on superior knowledge of seasonal wind patterns, ocean currents, and celestial navigation that enabled reliable maritime transportation when other civilizations were still hugging coastlines. Chinese records describe Srivijayan vessels designed for specific ocean conditions, ships with adjustable sail configurations, hull designs optimized for monsoon navigation, and storage systems that maintain cargo quality during months-long voyages. Their Buddhist centers functioned as maritime universities where navigators studied astronomy, meteorology, and oceanography, disguised as religious instruction. Knowledge preservation systems that maintain navigational databases across generations of sea captains. Srivijayan harbor engineering shows understanding of tidal patterns, sediment management, and ship maintenance that enabled permanent port facilities in tropical river environments that destroyed other civilizations' attempts at maritime infrastructure. Their technology wasn't metal or stone. It was the ocean itself, systematically understood and reliably navigated. Morning fog creeps across the Kabur River Valley as basalt statues emerge like ghosts from excavated foundations. Smooth, precisely carved figures that demonstrate mastery of one of the hardest stones known to ancient sculptors. Official narrative. Early proto-states that developed regional artistic styles during the transition between hunting-gathering and agricultural societies. Archaeological evidence reveals sculptural technology that pushed ancient stoneworking to its absolute limits. Tel Halef's artisans shaped extremely hard basalt into smooth surfaces and fine details using controlled abrasion and copper tools, techniques that produced results indistinguishable from modern mechanical polishing. The basalt sculptures required understanding of stone physics, tool metallurgy, and abrasive techniques that enabled precision work on stones that shatter conventional bronze and iron tools. Microscopic analysis shows systematic polishing that achieves surface smoothness measured in microns. Picture specialized sculptors working seasonal schedules, their workshops equipped with standardized tools and abrasive materials imported from distant sources. Master carvers, teaching apprentices to read stone grain and fracture patterns while calculating tool pressures that prevented catastrophic breaks during months-long carving projects. Excavations show standardized workshops and mass-produced decorative motifs, evidence of organized craft production rather than individual artistic experiments. Quality control systems that maintained consistent results across multiple production centers. Their stone wasn't art. It was engineered symbolism that combined technical mastery with cultural communication. Heat dances above the marshlands of ancient Eridu, where humanity's first urban experiment took place 7,000 years ago in the swamps of southern Mesopotamia. Official history. Early settlements that gradually developed agricultural techniques and simple architectural traditions. Archaeological truth. Complex water temples, leveled building platforms, canal systems, and administrative architecture that preceded Sumerian civilization by over a millennium, yet achieved urban planning sophistication that provided blueprints for every subsequent Mesopotamian city. The water temple at Eridu shows 17 successive building phases, each one larger and more sophisticated than the last. Not random construction, systematic architectural evolution that refined water management, ceremonial function, and urban integration across centuries of continuous development. Ubaid pottery demonstrates mass production techniques and standardized styles across distances spanning from Iraq to the Persian Gulf. Quality control and cultural unity that required systematic communication and technological standardization across dozens of settlements. Picture early urban planners directing earth-moving projects, while hydraulic engineers calculated canal gradients that would provide fresh water and waste removal for permanent settlements. Architects designing platforms that elevated important buildings above flood levels while maintaining access to river transportation. Before there were cities, there was their blueprint, systematic urban planning that solved fundamental problems of permanent settlement in challenging environments. Cold wind cuts through the Nile Delta ruins of Avaris, where foreign rulers introduced military technology that transformed Egyptian warfare and urban planning for the next 1,000 years. Official history. Foreign invaders who briefly controlled parts of Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period. Archaeological evidence. Systematic military innovators who introduced spoked-wheel chariots, composite bows, and fortified urban layouts that revolutionized Near Eastern warfare and defensive architecture. The Hyksos introduced horse-drawn chariots to Egypt, not just vehicles, but complete military systems that required understanding of horse training, chariot construction, and tactical coordination. Bronze fittings, leather harnesses, and wheel designs that transformed warfare from infantry clashes into mechanized cavalry operations. Their fortified cities featured ramparts, granaries, and administrative complexes designed according to defensive principles that had been tested in Syria and Palestine. Not random fortification, systematic defensive architecture based on military engineering experience. Picture Hyksos, engineers directing construction of ramparts, while weapons specialists trained Egyptian forces in chariot tactics and composite bow techniques. military architects integrating offensive and defensive systems that provided strategic advantages in mobile warfare. They didn't conquer Egypt with chaos. They conquered it with engineering superiority that taught Egyptians new methods of warfare and urban defense. Monsoon rain darkened stone stupas across Thailand, revealing geometric perfection that speaks of mathematical precision applied to both metallurgy and monumental architecture. Official story: early Buddhist culture that adapted Indian religious practices to Southeast Asian conditions. Archaeological reality: advanced metallurgy, standardized coinage systems, mandala-based city planning, and architectural ratios that demonstrate mathematical knowledge and engineering capabilities that influenced Southeast Asian development for over a millennium. Dvaravati metalworkers produced bronze artifacts with controlled alloy compositions and standardized techniques that enabled mass production of religious and utilitarian objects. Precision casting, surface finishing, and decorative techniques that required specialist training and quality control systems. Their urban planning followed mandala principles, geometric city layouts that integrated religious architecture with residential districts according to mathematical ratios that optimized both spiritual and practical functions. Picture metallurgists calculating alloy proportions, while urban planners position buildings according to geometric relationships that created visual harmony and functional efficiency. Architects applying mathematical principles to create cities that functioned as three-dimensional religious texts. Their geometry was devotion made physical, combining spiritual principles with engineering precision. Low fog rolls across massive mounds throughout the American Southeast, where complex chiefdoms created urban centers that coordinated political networks spanning from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Official narrative: tribal confederations that practiced agriculture and built ceremonial earthworks. Archaeological evidence: sophisticated urban planning, astronomical alignments, mass timber architecture, and political networks that coordinated trade and construction across thousands of miles. Soil analyses show engineered layering that optimized mound stability while providing drainage and structural support. Spiro, Moundville, Etowah, and dozens of other centers demonstrate standardized construction techniques, proportional systems, and astronomical alignments that required mathematical knowledge and systematic coordination across multiple generations. Picture engineers calculating Earth placement, while astronomers verified celestial alignments that connected individual sites to continental astronomical phenomena. Urban planners coordinating construction schedules across multiple sites separated by hundreds of miles. Their cities didn't rise above ground. They were built from the ground up, using earth and timber to create monumental architecture that has survived centuries of environmental challenges. The Sahara glitters under relentless sun, its surface revealing nothing of the engineering marvel that lies beneath. The Garamantian Foggara system, an underground water network that sustained urban civilization in the heart of the world's largest desert for over 1,000 years. Official narrative: nomadic tribes who occasionally practiced limited agriculture in scattered oases. Archaeological truth: systematically engineered underground aqueducts stretching for hundreds of miles, drawing fossil water from deep aquifers through tunneled channels that required surveying knowledge, gradient calculations, and maintenance systems that functioned across centuries. The Foggaras represent some of the most sophisticated hydraulic engineering in the ancient world. Underground channels hand-dug through solid rock, maintaining precise gradients across distances of 100+ kilometers. Vertical access shafts spaced at regular intervals for maintenance and construction access. Water flow systems that tapped deep aquifers and transported fresh water to surface settlements without evaporation loss. Picture Garamantian engineers working underground by torchlight, their teams excavating channels through desert bedrock, while surveyors maintain gradient tolerances measured in centimeters per kilometer. Hydraulic specialists calculating water flow requirements for agricultural areas positioned according to underground water availability. The engineering required understanding of hydrology, geology, and materials science that enabled systematic exploitation of groundwater resources in regions where surface water doesn't exist. quality control systems that maintained functionality across multiple generations of desert engineers. Garamantian settlements show evidence of urban planning, specialized craft production, and agricultural surplus that supported political networks extending across the Central Sahara, not nomadic wandering, permanent urbanization based on underground water security. Excavations reveal workshops, farms, and administrative centers supported entirely by the Foggara system. Urban populations that reach their maximum sustainable size according to water availability calculations that balance consumption with aquifer recharge rates. When the aquifers finally depleted around 700 CE, after over 1,000 years of continuous exploitation, Garamantian civilization collapsed as completely as their water supply. Communities scattered across the Sahara, carrying hydraulic knowledge that influenced well digging and water management throughout medieval North Africa. They conquered the desert from below, using technology that turned the Sahara into an underground machine for human survival. The camera pulls back. Ruins scattered across continents, tunnels stretching beneath deserts, canals cutting through jungles, monoliths piercing mountain mists, satellite images revealing buried grids that stretch to every horizon, 33 civilizations, 33 impossible achievements, technologies that appear without precedent, disappear without explanation, and challenge every comfortable assumption about human development. Göbekli Tepe's builders organizing massive construction before agriculture existed. The Indus Valley engineers creating urban infrastructure that wouldn't be equaled for thousands of years. Chavin architects manipulating human consciousness through acoustic engineering. Garamantian hydraulic systems sustaining cities in the heart of the Sahara. The pattern is inescapable. Innovation from cultures that textbooks have erased, forgotten, or deliberately marginalized. Not the great empires of Rome, Egypt, and Greece, but smaller, stranger civilizations that achieved technological breakthroughs while remaining invisible to mainstream historical narratives. How much human genius have we buried because history prefers simpler stories? How many innovations were achieved and lost because they didn't fit the linear progression from primitive to civilized that makes textbook authors comfortable? These weren't primitive peoples gradually discovering technology. These were sophisticated engineers, astronomers, metallurgists, and architects whose capabilities challenge our understanding of what ancient humans could achieve. The Minoans created Europe's first flush toilets. The Norte Chico built earthquake-resistant architecture without metal tools. The Nabateans turned desert cliffs into hydraulic machines. The Khmer Empire engineered cities for over 1 million people using monsoon-based water management. Each achievement stands alone as remarkable. Together, they suggest something more unsettling. Human capability has always exceeded our assumptions about human capability. The technologies we consider modern may be rediscoveries rather than innovations. The civilizations we consider advanced may be the survivors rather than the pioneers. The quiet question that emerges from these ruins: what if the most sophisticated ancient technologies belong to civilizations whose names we've forgotten? What if progress isn't linear but cyclical, knowledge discovered, lost, rediscovered across generations that left behind stone monuments and buried cities as their only testimony? Maybe the real mystery isn't how these impossible technologies were achieved. Maybe the mystery is how completely we've forgotten that they were achieved at all. What's your take on this? Which civilization shocked you most? The Aksumite stonecutters carving 500-ton monoliths from single granite blocks? The Hohokam engineers building continental irrigation systems in the American desert? The Sogdian merchants turning international trade into engineering science? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Every perspective helps keep these forgotten worlds alive in an age that prefers its history simple, its progress linear, and its ancient peoples safely primitive. Because every time someone remembers that humans have always been capable of the impossible, these buried civilizations become a little less lost.